Okay, it is 7 o'clock, and I would like to welcome everybody to oh gosh, it's the end of April already, the April 27th meeting of the Grafton Planning Board. How about that? Let's just make sure that everybody's here and not unintentionally muted. I'll very quick call the roll of everybody. Mr. Hassinger.
Present.
Mrs. Hassinger.
Present.
Mr. Wood.
Present.
Mr. Venkatraman.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Dave.
Present.
And staff present is our town planner.
Present, Chris.
Do I have any? I don't think I'm expecting any other staff. Is there any other staff present? Okay.
Natalia and Bob DeTomo. But, yep.
All righty.
One little thing, because of the Linda and my situation, it's going to look like I'm talking when she talks because we have one audio but two computers.
Okay. And also present with us are various folks representing applicants. Oh, and I forgot one of our most important staff members, Natalia. And well, everybody else will be called upon you at the appropriate time, I guess. Just to sort of go through a formality that this meeting of the Grafton Planning Board is being conducted entirely remotely pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, General Laws, Chapter 38, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place. Please note that this meeting is being recorded, as well as for the first time on one of the town Zoom meetings, we are broadcasting this live on the Grafton Community Television government channels. Thanks to Mr. DeToma here. We'll hope that goes well. And again, as a formality, every participation by the public for the public comment agenda item and the public hearings will be via the Zoom chat feature. And when using the chat to ask a question or make a comment, please include your name and address so that we have a record of who participated in the proceedings. Now, your comment or question will be read and responded to at the appropriate point in the proceedings. And finally, every vote will be taken by roll call. And I should actually try to bring up the agenda here so we can make some attempt to follow the agenda. First agenda item, as always, is public comment. If I do have any member of the public who is present for the meeting and wishes to raise a question or make a comment regarding an item that is not already on the agenda for tonight, now would be a good time to do that.
So, Mr. Chairman, if I may, I'll note that we do currently have 9 attendees. So if we want to give a few minutes, they can use either the chat feature or at the bottom of their screen. There's also the Q&A feature. So those would both be good ways to express comments at this time.
All right, so we'll give folks a moment to type in their questions or comments if they have any. And if not, we will proceed with the next agenda item.
Yes.
Okay, so our next agenda item is a discussion of the draft zoning language and zoning map update for 27 Upton Street, the old DPW site.
Dave, you see the message from Prabhu? I agree.
I concur. Let's, the message is, and yes, it's a good idea. Can we have a moment of silence for our fellow Graftonites who have departed due to COVID? One who is known to many of us passed over the weekend. There may or may not be others, but there's one we know about. So Let's observe a moment of silence. Yeah, thank you for the suggestion. Okay, moving on. We have, as mentioned, draft. I'm sorry, my screen real estate is limited, so I'm sort of trying to trying to be able to observe everything. Anyway, sorry for the hiccup here. Chris, can you sort of briefly explain the proposal for zoning for the old DPW site?
Yeah, and I'll also unmute Nate Kelly from Horsley Witten here is with us. Sorry, I don't know if you've, yeah. So we've been working on updating the zoning for, or proposing an updated zoning for the DPW Public Works site. This will allow us to have the zoning in place that if the town votes to dispose of the property, the zoning will be in place to create a better project and end product moving forward. So that's kind of the brief overview. We're mainly utilizing the village mixed use zoning that has been implemented in other areas and tweaking it for the DPW site context.
Have any board members had a chance to review that and have questions or comments off the
I was gonna say, I have reviewed this. I haven't gotten too down in the weeds on it, so to speak, yet, but I did have one question that Chris, you may be able to help me or someone else here offhand. Why are we listing it as 10% for affordable for the village mixed use GW thing rather than the 25-20 like we have for the others?
Chris, did you want me to answer to that?
Yeah, if you can jump in there, that'd be, yeah.
Thanks. And hello, everybody, members of the board, Mr. Chairman. My first trip in front of the board here in Grafton, so thanks for having me under these strange circumstances that we find ourselves in now. But to get to the question, there was, to give you just a quick little background, this kind of zoning is something that we do quite a bit of across New England, looking at village centers, old corridors, gateways, these types of sort of small strategic rezonings. We had spoken with staff and others who had some experience with the village mixed use bylaw that you have to date. And I raised the question coming into this, sort of observing and saying, you know, based on what I know about the housing market here in Grafton, granted as an outsider, but having looked at some of the statistics around property values and median home prices and those types of things, and then looking at the small scale of what we're doing here, this isn't a very large parcel, so the type of the scale of redevelopment here is going to be pretty small from a developer's perspective, the number of units that you would expect. And it was my opinion, without having run any serious pro forma analysis or anything like that, that from a market perspective, it was going to be very hard to get a developer to meet those affordability thresholds, and that the town might want to consider in this instance, because it is such a small development, reducing those and just using maybe a 10, maybe a 15% number that would maintain. You wouldn't lose any ground relative to your subsidized housing inventory, but from a pro forma perspective, with the site development costs that you're going to find here, we thought that it might be a way that you could make this a little bit more attractive.
And just to ask it for your back of the napkin math and coming up with the 10%, do you have any idea what you what we might expect for based on the current drafting of this article and everything, for the maximum number of units, whether there be rental or ownership in the lot that we're talking about?
Well, again, that's one of the more important, and it's a particularly complicated question for this site. It usually isn't a difficult question, but it's, which density caps are you going to put on this? So, you will regulate the answer to that question. So,
Yeah.
if you look at the pad, as it were, the concrete, the asphalt area, I don't remember the exact calculation on that. But the entire parcel, which is a very strangely shaped, sort of U-shaped parcel, is about 7 acres, between 6 and 7 acres. So if you figure that pad might be around 3 acres, and if you were looking at, now you start to do the math, what are we going to regulate this at 8 units an acre, then you're at 24 and so forth. One of the questions I had, and I don't want to get off track, I want to make sure that I answer to your question, but this site is again, very strangely shaped. There's a lot of wetland area. There's a lot of forested area. So the idea of using a units per acre calculation becomes a little tricky. You really have to be clear about what you're saying here. Usually in a village setting, you don't have a lot of wetlands you're dealing with. You don't have a lot of constraints, and you figure the developer is just going to maximize the site. And so that units per acre gives you a pretty clear expectation of what you're going to get. This is different. About, half of your site is developable. So if you're saying units per acre, then you're accounting for a lot of land that isn't developable, that isn't accessible. So that was one of the comments that I had in the zoning, is I wanted to get some guidance from you all. How do you usually use that calculation? Are you considering the entire parcel? And when you look at this site, should the town consider cutting the site in half and subdividing it, recognizing that the developer, if someone comes to buy the property, they're probably not going to be particularly interested in owning a lot of wetlands. And those wetlands are more valuable in the public interest to the town than they are to the developer. So you could consider a simple subdivision, but that all sort of comes back to this units per acre calculation. How many acres are we working with? And then we can get into this number of how many we can expect, because the developer will just try to optimize their investment.
I should point out that the reason we're talking about this tonight is that we've been asked to consider whether it's possible to put this onto the warrant for the spring town meeting, which is now going to be held June 20th. So up till that point, I at least had been thinking of it more in terms of a fall town meeting item. So given that there's at least a possibility that we could try to put it on this Springtown meeting, that's why we're talking about it tonight. We have to understand that if we are contemplating a Springtown meeting for this, the timeline for this is very tight. I think if we don't plan it, if we don't commit tonight to putting it on, we probably need to make that commitment at our meeting 1 week from tonight, so that we can meet the scheduling requirements for advertising and holding our public hearings in time for the planning board to have completed its hearings and its report prior to town meeting. So I haven't tried to work out the exact schedule, but basically we pretty much need to make a commitment tonight to put this in. Caveat there is that we may be wanting to, if we do want to move forward with this, we may be wanting to modify some of the details there. For instance, that 10% figure that Mr. Wood brought up, and there are some items in the use table which we may want to take a closer look at. We don't necessarily need to get all that done tonight, but if we do want to move forward with this, we probably need to plan to basically pretty much finalize this next week.
When you say finalize it, do you mean the entirety of the changes we would be doing, or finalize the fact that we want to push it forward and have the public hearing process?
No. At
Yeah.
this point, you have to have the language, submit it, the actual warrant article, I think. And so that you have language to publish, to have a hearing on. I have the feeling that we're rushing. You know, it's an important decision what happens there. I'm not clear how much consensus we have across the town for any of this at this point. I haven't heard the selectmen, any of them have any opinion about what we should or shouldn't do there. So rushing into it, maybe we're not, and I'm just missing that.
Yeah, I can't say. I haven't heard the opinion or position of any other boards. It is my understanding that the town administrator is particularly interested in this, but he may or may not be expressing an interest on behalf of the select board. That I don't know. Yeah, I'm just not. I'm not quite sure. I mean, this is something that I think we've had in mind, but it's sort of come up a little bit quicker than I was anticipating it would.
I think for some of our other major zoning initiatives that we've done things like sit with the selectmen and talk about it in a joint meeting.
Yep, I think just looking at the calendar, we basically would have two possible choices for holding a public hearing on this. That would be May 18th or June 8th. And June 8th is cutting it very close to time. I mean, it could be done. But you're absolutely right, Bob, that in order to even advertise the public hearing, we have to have language that's either exactly what we want or close enough that we could make some relatively minor changes at town meeting. We generally would like to avoid making changes at town meeting. We like to have everything lined up prior to town meeting. So I think even independent of the opinion of any other boards, and we could sort of, if we wanted to proceed with this, at least put it on the table for consideration. We can, between now and town meeting, we can get a sense from other boards, and in the worst case, if our collective judgment is that we're really not ready for it, we can always pass it over at town meeting. But I guess the reason for, even as I understand it, Chris, you may be able to correct me if I'm wrong or misunderstanding things. The reason for at least attempting to get this done in June is as a way of having the zoning in place to make the property more marketable for such time as the DPW does move off-site. And you have anything to add to that, Chris?
No, that's correct. And I just reiterate that the ask for tonight is that we have a public hearing date. So, and we were looking at the May 18th date, preferably. That doesn't mean that we can't still discuss it even beyond the public meeting portion of it, although, up to town meeting, we can still adjust specifics as needed. But this would set the date that we would have the public hearing on it officially, and that would give us enough time to notice that request as well.
Yep, as Bob reminded us, though, when we advertise a public hearing, we typically expect to have the actual zoning bylaw amendments available for the public to review once they're aware that there is a public hearing. They need to have a draft zoning bylaw to look at. And if May 18th is to be the date, I believe it is this week that the advertisement has to be placed.
Dave, look at
So,
chat. Natalie says there isn't time.
Yeah. Natalia says we can't
public
have,
calendar.
yeah, we can't publish for a May 18th public hearing. We're past the date for that. But all I was gonna say is, from what I read in the draft changes for adding this mixed use, I don't have any concerns about anything that's strong enough at this point to say I would want to hold back on adding it to the warrant articles. I don't know if discussion in a public hearing would make me feel different, or if discussion among the board would make me feel different on any of that. But I'm happy to move it forward.
I will point out that if it's not possible to advertise for a May 18th hearing, and Natalie knows the scheduling better than I do, then our choices for a public hearing this would be June 8th or a planning board meeting that's not currently scheduled sometime between May 18th and June 8th. In either case, I mean, May 25th is off the table for consideration because that's a Memorial Day. It's a holiday. So that would push it to sometime past that. We could look at the scheduling and consider, you know, that. All right, not to run too far off here. If we cannot schedule a May 18th hearing, then the public hearing scheduling at the very least gives us an opportunity to look at this a little bit more, sort of finalize our proposed language at our next meeting 1 week from tonight, which we can then proceed with our public, you know, with advertising and a public hearing and so on. So if we as a board are generally comfortable with, yeah, let's try to do this for June, we can work on it a little bit more between now and next week. We can come prepared to set a definite hearing date and decide what the language is that we want to submit for the warrants. We could make that work, I think. As I said, June 8th is cutting it close to June 20th for town meeting, but it's not unworkable. We have in the past met similar tight schedules for town meeting warrant articles. So it's not impossible. It's like I say, it's cutting it close, but it's doable.
Does everybody here get to see the Q&A? I noticed that Ed Prisby made it.
Yep. Yeah, so I can read that quickly, and then we'll just, I think we've somewhat addressed it, but I'll click that, we'll answer it live. But Mr. Prisby has stated in the Q&A, as a select board member, please don't wait to have us have an opinion. We frequently have no opinions on anything. Don't let that stop you from operating in the town's best interest.
The thing is, it's the selectmen who are basically selling. They're looking to sell the property, making the decision to market and sell the property. So I want to be sure that that's what the town wants to do, and that we're putting it up in a form that they will have the most success with.
Well, one thing though, in a sense, the town would also decide at town meeting what the town wants to do, because that's the legislature. And if we put something forward and they don't like it, you know, they'll say no. If they like it, they'll say yes. So we don't necessarily have to have a stamp of approval.
No, but do you remember when we had a meeting where we all sat around the tables, we all talked about major zoning proposals before we went ahead with them?
I know.
Remember when we did that?
Yeah.
And we have enough
Yeah, I don't
This
think-
is a good time to be careful about how we just jump on stuff. We'll be talking about that in a minute.
um, I don't really have
Okay.
I looked through it. I can see the recommendation to reduce the affordable housing percentage, because I do agree, it's not a big site at all. And I don't have a problem with that change going in. And I thought it was pretty much what we've talked about for this site before. This isn't brand new in front of us. So, you know, I'm happy to do something.
Yeah, and we might recall that there were some public forums held and some visioning sessions regarding the potential reuse of this property, and what's now in front of us is essentially the result of all that. That was a very public process. A lot of people participated in it, and pretty much this is what was generally thought of as preferred. So I think unless there's a really strong objection, I say we go for it. Let's plan on submitting this. Let's plan on, because there are a couple of little details I'm going to want to review before we sort of commit some language. I was hoping to get more of that done prior to night, but other things grabbed my attention. So I'm going to say let's plan on doing this. Let's finalize it at our next meeting, and basically vote to. I'll propose a vote to submit this for the warrant. We can schedule a public hearing. We can talk about whether June 8th or some other date is best for a public hearing. Like I said, June 8th is really the only opportunity for a regularly scheduled board meeting. And I'd probably prefer not to set up a special meeting unless we really have to. But anyway, let's give that some more thought between now and next week.
So you're saying we'll finalize the language and vote next week?
That's my proposal.
Okay, let's do that. Do we need a
And
vote?
I just wanted to, go ahead. Sorry, Bob, go ahead.
No.
All I was gonna say was to your point earlier about the town voting about the property. On the warrant articles, for draft warrant articles right now, it does have Article 20 for disposal of the property at 27 Upton Street. So that the town will be voting on at this town meeting whether to allow the select board to sell it. And I don't see having the zoning changing for that property on the same warrant as an issue. I don't think we need to wait for that. That was just gonna be my comment.
I didn't understand. Do you think we should go ahead with what Dave said, or do you think we shouldn't?
I think we should go ahead with what Dave said, and I was just
Okay.
mentioning about where you said the town decides, still needs to decide on if we're going to allow the property to be sold.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, if the town decides not to sell it, do we still want to do this with the zoning, or do we want to, you don't want to come back at the next meeting with another zoning change. I don't know.
Yeah.
Let's just, next week we can
Yeah.
sort through that, but have it in mind as a question to be aware of.
Yep, like I said, the whole process that led to this said that the public was pretty much interested in this sort of use for the property. Now, whether it's sold to another developer, or whether it's sold now, or whether we hold off on selling it, the zoning does represent the current sense of the public as to what should be done with the property sooner or later. But yeah, let's give that a little bit more thought if we need to. If we hear anything between now and next week that leads us to change our mind about it, but otherwise, I'll assume let's come prepared to make any language changes we might want to make and plan a public hearing, and plan to put it on the warrant. So, anything else on that? If not, thank you, Nate, for putting this all together. I will, just as a side note, point out that I've observed, Nate had proposed a few other a few minor tweaks to the village mixed use language that don't have anything directly to do with this property, but just generally are something that seemed that in his experience is likely to be language that's better suited to what we need. I'll follow up with that comment by saying we are currently in the early stages of reviewing another village mixed use project, which is actually the topic of one of our public hearings tonight. And as I said, when we started out on that, I think we're going to find, as we work through that, we are likely to find additional changes that are going to turn out to be useful for the village mixed use section of the bylaw. So I know we're going to be coming back to revisit VMU sometime later this year or next year. So this is not the end, but there's and I wouldn't propose trying to expand upon the changes that are proposed for this time around, to keep it as simple as it, not to make it any more complicated than it currently is.
Well, we will be with you every step of the way here. So we'll see you at your next meeting. And if there's anything, Chris, that I can do between now and then, if you hear any specific comments or questions that I can help answer or be prepared to answer, or any edits I can make in the interim, just let me know.
Thank you.
Just to that point, if any of the board members, as they review this further, if they have any comments or questions, it wouldn't hurt to submit those, send those off to Chris, and Chris can work with Nate to, answer any questions that may come up between now and then, in hopes of making our discussion a week from now a little bit more concise. So that said, it is now just past 7:30. And we have some other action items on our agenda, which we'll have to come back to. But I would like to start off the bat at 7:30 with our public hearing session by dealing with several public hearings for which a continuation has been requested by the applicant. So just looking at them in order. Item B, 165 Worcester Street. Applicant has submitted a written request for a continuation to May 4th. So I think I'd be willing to entertain a motion that the board accepts said written request.
I move that we go for it.
I move that we accept the applicant's written request for 165 Worcester Street public hearing date to be continued until May 4th at 7:30 p.m.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. A roll call vote. Mr. Hassinger.
Aye.
Ms. Hassinger.
Aye.
Mr. Wood.
Aye.
Mr. Venkatraman.
Aye.
Mr. Robbins. Aye. Declare the motion carried unanimously. Let's see. The next one I have is item C. The major residential special permit at 124R North Street. The applicant there has also requested a continuation to what date, Chris? I don't have it right in front of me.
May 18th.
May 18th.
I move that we accept the applicant's written request for the 124 North Street rear to continue the public hearing until May 18th at 7:30 p.m.
Second.
Moved and seconded that we accept the applicant's request to continue to May 18th. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. Mr. Hassinger.
Aye.
Ms. Hassinger.
Aye.
Mr. Wood.
Aye.
Mr. Venkatraman.
Aye.
Mr. Robbins. Aye. Motion carried unanimously. Item D. Major residential special permit at 18 Carroll Road. Same thing, a request for continuation to May 18th.
I move that we accept the applicant's written request for 18 Carroll Road to continue the public hearing till May 18th at 7:30 p.m.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Major residential special permit at 18 Carroll Road continued to May 18th. Any discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Hassinger.
Aye.
Ms. Hassinger.
Aye.
Mr. Wood.
Aye.
Mr. Venkatraman.
Aye.
Mr. Robbins. Aye. Declare the motion carried unanimously. We have same property, different topic, a definitive plan approval at 18 Carroll Road, also requested to be continued to May 18th.
I move that we accept the applicant's written request for the major residential special permit and definitive plan approval for 18 Carroll Road be continued until May 18th at 7:30 p.m.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Definitive plan approval, 18 Carroll Road, continued to May 18th. Discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Hassinger.
Aye.
Ms. Hassinger.
Aye.
Mr. Wood.
Aye.
Mr. Venkatraman.
Aye.
Mr. Robbins, I declare that motion carried unanimously. Let's see. Okay, that's all the continuations. So now we go back to item A, the request for special permit and site plan approval at 100 Westboro Road. This is a continuation from March 23rd of the Village Mixed Use Project. So where are we at with this project? My memory says that when we last discussed this, the applicant was going to be having the project reviewed by a Conservation Commission for wetlands and stormwater. What progress has been made on this project?
So we are in receipt of all of our comments now from Graves. The one thing that we did want to find out is if there's any comments that we should be anticipating between police, fire, water, or sewer. But we are in the process of meeting up with Conservation Commission. We had some questions on the wetland line that needed to be reflagged, which has been done, and the DEP forms have been updated and sent over to them for review. Other than that, we're making some last minute kind of finalization changes between Graves and planning board's comments that we've received to date. Haven't really had, overall, they were fairly reasonable requests. We did have a couple questions after the last meeting that we had. There were, I think the board had a couple questions regarding the road standards and how we were going to be looking at the interior road. Didn't know if anybody on the board had had a chance to talk as far as public or private. I think there were some discrepancies between the new zoning bylaw and the development bylaw. As far as condos versus rental, we're planning on the affordable housing, the 20% ownership, 25% rental is per the bylaw. That's part of it. Traffic study has been completed. You have a traffic memo that we need to go over with Dominic and just get some final decisions from him as far as how he wants to incorporate some of their recommendations. And then I don't believe we've done this yet, but we are planning on talking to, doing a public outreach for 120 and 122 Westboro Road, just to let them know about the project and where we're going with it in case they have any concerns. But other than that, you know, we're in the process of finalizing some of our comments and response to comments and awaiting any other feedback if we should be anticipating comments from police, fire, water, or sewer. We don't want to be submitting multiple iterations of the plans if we have some other comments that might impact our design.
Did you say you are doing rental for the affordable?
I believe that was part of the stipulation with this village mixed use, correct, Dominic?
Okay, fair.
Yes.
And does that qualify, let us count all of the units?
Yes, I believe it does.
The only other thing I think that we wanted to clarify was I was somewhat all over the place. I apologize at the last meeting with the number of units and retail. Just wanted to clarify that we have two of the buildings that will have retail on the first floor, and that's approximately 7,000 square feet for each of the two buildings, for a total of 14,000 square feet of retail in the first two buildings off of Westboro Road, and then for a total of 8 units. And then 23 one-bedroom, 78 two-bedroom, and then 4 two-bedroom townhouses as part of the project.
And did you say that the traffic study itself is complete already?
Yes, we have
have
a
it.
traffic study in hand. There are a couple items that we'll need to go over with Dominic, and we should be able to submit that with the final submit or the next set of revisions.
Okay. So it sounds like there's a number of plan revisions in the works. Is there anything you want to discuss with the board prior to completing those revisions? Anything the board wants to discuss with the applicant prior to the applicant submitting revised plans and additional documentation, including things like the traffic study?
One question I did have was, one of the comments that came back was regarding the landscape plan requirements from a registered landscape architect. And we wanted to find out if that's something that could be waived by the board, or if it's a requirement, or if we could propose a waiver for that. I don't believe.
So my understanding is that it is a requirement, but the board does have the power to waive that if it was submitted on the waiver request form.
Any thoughts from the board on that?
Well, they can request it.
I'm interested in your current thinking on why you would be asking to waive it.
Just to keep, the idea is to keep the landscaping of the site, if I'm correct, Dominic, something for that village feel, something that we have a design engineer that's capable of doing the landscape details and the layout, but is not a registered landscapes, just to keep some of the work in-house.
Well, maybe that's what your waiver request should say. Not,
Okay.
not to waive the requirement, but to waive
The registration.
registration.
Okay.
I think the landscaping is important.
Yes. So we do plan on doing landscape. We do have landscape plans. I believe they were in there before. It's just they won't be stamped by a registered landscape architect.
Yep, I think, as Mr. Hassinger said, we can certainly request the waiver. The board can review the material submitted, and if the board is satisfied that the landscape plans are acceptable, basically just lacking the stamp of a registered landscape architect, the board can consider whether to grant the waiver. But yes, as Bob said, you could just make that point in your submission to make sure that we're clear on why you're making that particular request.
Okay.
Anything else from the applicant at this point? Anything you want from the board?
Dominic, did you have anything?
No, right now I don't have anything. We already did the sewing up and everything on the Westboro Road, and all the pump station, everything's just about all done. You just needed to get the pumps in, and that's it. But we did a tons of work up there.
Anything from the board before we move on with this one?
Just one other thing. In the waiver request, probably an outline of the qualifications of the person who is doing it.
Okay.
Yeah, good idea.
How do we know if there's anyone at this hearing wants to make a comment?
So we could open it up to comments. We haven't received any in the chat or in the Q&A at this time. It's probably a good opportunity that I would point out that if the public has questions that arise while we're discussing here, they can feel free at any time to add it into the Q&A section. And then the board, the chairman, Mr. Robbins, can recognize those questions. We'll read them and answer them at the appropriate time. But,
yes, and at this particular time, if the board has no other questions or comments, certainly I would invite the public to submit your comments before we move on to the next hearing, and I will allow just a moment or two for anybody to to type, because it's a little bit different than in the meeting room where I can see someone raising their hand or walking up to the podium. It's a little bit different here. I, as the chair of the meeting, still have some getting used to. So, hearing and seeing no other questions or comments, I guess we can contemplate a good date to continue this hearing to.
So sorry, we do have one question that just came through the Q&A. If I may. So this is from
Please answer that.
Fergie Puchel. It says, I'll click that we'll answer live here. The question is, should we be using Q&A or chat? My preferred method, obviously I defer to the board, but I think for operating this way, the Q&A would be the preferred method. It allows us to kind of keep track of those questions in a live fashion. We'll still be monitoring chat as well, just as a matter of process, but Q&A is the preferred method.
Okay, anything else? All right, so I guess for the applicant, when do you think you will be ready to resume this public hearing with us? You know, assuming that we, you'll need the time to finish up all the plan revisions and other documentation you're working on, get that submitted to us in enough time so that we have at least a week or so to review them before another meeting. So obviously May 4th is out of the question. We can't, but May 18th and June 8th are the next two.
I believe the May 18th should be fine. We should be able to get the remainder of the revisions, comments, questions addressed, and our remaining questions with Dominic in the next week, and be able to wrap everything up and get the revised set of plans into both planning and conservation.
Okay. So with that, so how do we handle in a remote environment here the applicant's written request for continuation? Any suggestions, Chris?
Sorry, I was just responding to a question quickly. Can you repeat that?
Yeah, so normally at the hearing in the meeting room, we have a piece of paper that the applicant can fill out to make the written request for continuation. It's kind of hard to do that in this environment. I guess unless there is a better way to do it, I'm going to take the applicant making a verbal request, following it up with an email to which will constitute the written request.
Yeah, I believe that's sufficient. We can also, once that letter or email is submitted, then we can coordinate having the board sign that after the fact as well. But having it on the record here, I believe, is sufficient for the requirements.
All right. Hearing that, I'll make the motion that we approve the applicant's verbal request with anticipated written request to continue the public hearing until Monday, May 18th, 2020 at 7:30 p.m.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded that we accept the request to continue to May 18th. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll put it to a vote. Mr. Hassinger.
Aye.
Ms. Hassinger.
Aye.
Mr. Wood.
Aye.
Mr. Venkatraman. Mr. Robbins, aye. Declare the motion carried unanimously. Thank you, and we'll look forward to following up on this in 3 weeks or so.
Great, thank you so much.
All right, so let's move on. Our next,
What's that?
referring back to my agenda here. Oh, yes. So the next one on the agenda would be a new request for special permit and site plan approval at 274 Providence Road. This being new, I will ask the clerk to read the legal notice.
Right. Pursuant to sections 1.3.3, 1.5.7, and 12 of the Town of Grafton zoning bylaws, the planning board will hold a public hearing on Monday, April 27th, 2020, commencing at 7:30 p.m. to consider a special permit application and site plan approval for 8 dwelling units on less than 1 acre of land on property located at 274 Providence Road, Grafton Assessors Map 115, Lot 31. Said property is located in the Village Mixed Use District. The applicant owner is Providence Street Village, Inc. Copies of the application and plan are available for public inspection on the Town of Grafton website at www.grafton-ma.gov on the Planning Department Development Projects webpage. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March stay-at-home advisory, this meeting will be conducted via remote participation. Please see www.grafton-ma.gov/planning-board for more information.
Okay, so we have here representing the applicant. If the applicant and representatives could introduce themselves.
Hi, my name is Dan Hazen. I'm from Garrier and Halnon.
I'm David Claro. I'm the owner of 274 Providence Road.
All right, and you two are the ones going to be speaking for this project?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so why don't you introduce the project to the board, and then we'll take it from there.
Okay, the project's located in South Grafton. It's between Providence Road and Main Street, next to Cumberland Farms, and it abuts the Grafton Housing Authority, the Green Acres multifamily property. Right now on the property, there's a single-family house. There's a detached garage. The house was built back in the 1800s. It's fallen into disrepair, as well as the garage. The property itself is about 3,600 square feet. It's serviced by public water and public sewer. Currently, the lot's pretty well overgrown with shrubs and tall grass. The property is located in the Village Mixed Use District, and the plan as proposed is to tear down the existing house and garage, cap the water service. In conversations with the sewer department, they've allowed us to use the existing sewer service that's there and tie into that, so we won't have to disrupt Providence Road for that. The plan's to construct 8 3-bedroom condominium units with a driveway that's going to go from Providence Road out to Main Street. The Main Street connection's not for, that's for emergency vehicles only. That's not for general use. The drainage will be collected into subsurface infiltration chambers after going through a stormwater treatment unit to remove any total suspended solids and any possible pollutants before entering the groundwater. This is in a groundwater overlay protection district. We will need to go, we're over the 25% for impervious area, but we're under the 75. We're at approximately 47% impervious in this district. But through the groundwater recharge of the rainwater, we will be replenishing any wellheads in the area. There is a sidewalk that's connecting out from Main Street to Providence Road. And there's a dumpster that will be enclosed on site for collecting any refuse and garbage from the individual units. We did receive a comment letter from the planner on Friday. We do have some revisions that we do need to make. We're still waiting on a review letter from Graves Engineering as well. We need to do a landscape plan, a lighting plan, parking calculations. We do have the required parking of 2 spaces, one outside and 1 inside for a 3-bedroom. And we have to provide signage for any signs that we're going to have for the property. The project, the way that it's situated, there's going to be 2 units facing Providence Road, and then the remaining 6 units will be, they won't be facing either street. They'll be parallel with the, or perpendicular to the roads. So that's the project as it stands submitted.
And you said one of the road entrances are only emergency access. Was that the Main Street entrance you said?
Correct.
And what sort of delineation or markings or whatever are you going to be using to prevent regular pedestrian traffic, so to speak, like commuter traffic?
Well, there will be signs, no exit signs and no entrance signs. But as far as, we didn't really want to gate it, but I mean, that is a option.
I have a secondary concern at that entrance as well. If that's emergency access, that corner at least appears on paper to be very tight for what our, the fire trucks in town would be able to make a corner of. I don't know if our, fire engines could make that corner. So I don't
Okay.
know, that's something I would like to get input from our fire department on, if we can.
I can produce a plan showing the turning radiuses. I'll just have to talk to Chief Cothier about what his ladder truck or his tower truck has for a radius to be able to turn into that area. But that's something I can provide.
Yeah, that would be good for fire to weigh in this.
Do you see the guy with the beard? Oh no, it's on your. Didn't he sent it to you? Didn't he?
Sorry. Yeah, so just an update with Graves Engineering. I did discuss with them. I believe those comments will be coming in hopefully this week, but they've been working on those and just have not yet completed them for submission.
Yep. So it appears to me that there's some work in process, basically. Our town planner has provided some comments just this past Friday. Graves Engineering is working on their review. We've had a few other comments and questions tonight so far. So first off, clearly we're going to be continuing to work on this at a future meeting. So we don't need to try to. We're not going to wrap this up tonight, certainly, but I would like to make sure that we have as many as possible questions on the table and comments and concerns, so the applicant can address as much as possible between now and the next hearing.
I had two questions. Dave, can I?
Yeah.
So one of them was pertaining to a traffic study. Is that part of the plan? Are we going to have a traffic study for this project?
Well, I mean, it's 8 units, 3-bedroom, so we're not anticipating a large volume of traffic. It's a Route 122 and Route 122A, so the extra 50 vehicles trips per day, I don't see as being a large increase to either of those roads. I mean, if that's something the town would require, then we can do that. But again, that's in the grand scheme of the roads that we're dealing with here, I don't believe this to be a large increase.
Yeah, I wonder if this could be a cut through from Providence Road to Main Street for cars.
I mean, at that point, we could gate the, put some sort of a chain or a gate at the Main Street entrance to provide, other than the signs.
Yeah. That was my thinking on that initially, was that it could be used cut through and something that is compatible with, our public safety departments for how they would want emergency access to be blocking commuter access. That would be amenable to me on that, for accommodating that. I don't know if a gate or, with a chain or a lockbox of some sort is the best option here, but that's something I was thinking about.
Okay, I mean, that's something we can talk to the fire department or the police and see what they would feel would be the best solution to that. And would that be amenable to the board
Yeah.
as far as to prevent a cut through in that situation?
Chris, this was referred to both of them, wasn't it? And did we get any comments? from that?
Yeah. So it was submitted. I don't believe we've gotten, let me just double check here. We haven't received a comment back from them, so I can follow up and make sure that they've reviewed the plans.
Yes, I know from past experience, Chris, it's we often have to kind of the board often has to proactively follow up with fire, particularly. It's just because of the nature of the department there, they don't always have a lot of bandwidth to respond, and sometimes we get a response verbally, but we always like to have something in writing. So certainly we should follow up, and particularly the question of a couple of questions. One is the fire access, an appropriate means of securing that emergency entrance only. It's kind of hard to tell how likely the public would be to see this as a cutting across from between Providence Road and Main Street, but it's a possibility that has to be considered. As far as the traffic study is concerned, off the top of my head, I don't remember whether a project of this nature is one that where our bylaw requires a traffic study, or if a traffic study is considered optional for this project. I just don't. I didn't think to look that up ahead of time, so I don't know the answer to that.
Okay. And the other, sorry, go ahead, Linda.
I just have one question. Just looking at the map, the place looks pretty tight for 8 units. What kind of waivers are we looking at, and will we be discussing later or tonight?
Yeah, under the village mixed use, a project of this nature is allowed without a special permit if it's 8 units per acre. We're in a special permit here because this project is 8 units, but the land is slightly less than 1 acre. So the density here mathematically works out to be just over 9 per acre. We allow up to 16 per acre by special permit in the village mixed use. So this pretty much, it falls well within the parameters of village mixed use. 16 units per acre is contemplated as not unreasonable in general in village mixed use. So yeah, while this project visually, it does look like it's very tight on this particular parcel of land, it's nevertheless within the general parameters, but it does require a special permit to approve a density that's slightly more than 8 units per acre.
Just a comment, it would be hard to do an accurate traffic study at this time because traffic.
True.
I don't know that they have any tables for adjusting to the current, they do that,
You won't
they
get
get,
any-
to correct for the month and whatever that they do it, but I'm not sure they have any tables for pandemics.
No, if you could not realistically measure the current level of traffic at this point in time. You could, if you have some recent historic traffic counts for Providence Road and or Main Street, and in this case, since the primary, the exclusive access is really intended to be Providence Road, you'd want to look for historic traffic counts in Providence Road and probably the intersection of Providence Road and Main Street. But if you don't have access to historic, reasonably current historic data, you'd be hard pressed to do a credible traffic study.
Wouldn't be worth anything.
I think that there's a chance that there is some data though, because there's been a lot of activity around that. We rebuilt the intersection. We have the current TIP project for the whole of Main Street.
Yes.
And so this it's at least a reasonable chance that something might be out there.
Again, just, you know, this is only 8 units, so it's not a shopping plaza or any sort of strip mall, that type of thing. I mean, we're anticipating standard, residential traffic out of this.
Yeah, I think if, if we had, yeah, and I'm, just sort of, and this is dangerous to sort of think out loud, but if there is readily available traffic counts on the appropriate roads, and then at least a rough estimate, you can come up with a rough estimate for the traffic generated by this particular development. It may be fairly obvious without undertaking a lengthy study
Right.
that the traffic impact is minimal. But if we had some numbers to look at,
Great.
then-
I'll check with Mass DOT,
Yeah.
and I'm sure they have something in that area. But
Yep.
That was my first question, Dave. The second question I had was, do these kinds of projects warrant any geotechnical study or anything of that nature?
I would think not. I mean, the terrain here is fairly level, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah.
yes, it is, and there's very good sand and gravel for the material under it. It's we did do soil testing out there. We do have USDA soil testing information in the area, but again, it's going to be think of it as a condominium building, not as a, it's not a large, it looks big on paper as it stands, but, in the grand scheme, it's going to be a residential house.
Yep. But yeah, I think Prabhu's question sort of comes up from a previous project where we got very involved in some geotechnical concerns, primarily due to the fact that the topography had included some unusually steep slopes and
Okay.
a lot of potential for landslides and so on, particularly with the disturbance that was being proposed to build something. So, in situations where the topography could be very problematic, we'd be looking for some geotechnical work, but this doesn't seem to be that anywhere near that sort of situation.
No, this is an extremely flat site, and the only area that we have any slope is on the Main Street side, where there's the least amount of land disturbance that's going to be proposed. And again, that's only, I think, about 5 or 6 feet in elevation change in a very short area. So
yeah.
Thank you.
If any other questions or concerns that the board wants to raise at this point? You had your hand up, Justin?
Yes, I just have a few minor things. The first is directly for Dan, and this is extremely nitpicky and minor on the plan, and I want to just call it out though, is that on the sheet 2 of your plan, I noticed that Stephen Teixeira, I totally butchering the last name, but the address is listed as 278, it's 276.
okay,
That's,
I'll adjust that.
one comment, and in reading the public notice, the public comments that were submitted to our board, there was a few, at least 2 people that said they did not receive the notice. Steve was one of them. I know he was listed in the package for the abutters list. So I would suspect that went out. I don't remember who sends that, if it's the town that sends these out, the notices, or if it's you as the applicant. But I did notice the other person listed in the correspondence, Pete Wajner, again, I'm butchering the last name,
Wayner.
is not in the abutters list, but his address is, and ArcGIS also shows not Pete as the owner of that address. So that could explain why they just didn't get to
And
the assessor's office.
just to that point, the applicant has basically done what they're obligated under law to do,
Yep.
which is to pull in a butters list. And we occasionally see this happen where between the time the assessor's records that produce the abutters list were updated and the time of the actual project, sometimes ownership changes. And it's an unfortunate glitch, but there's really no way around it. The assessor's office doesn't get notice of the ownership changes instantly when a property changes hands. So, yeah, that
I just wanted to call
noticed
that
that comment
out
too.
for
Yeah.
for those abutters that may be watching this. That's why I figured
Yes.
I'd call that out. And
I'll
then
update the plans.
Do we know if that's a case here? Have any of those properties changed hands recently?
The one at 10 Main Street has changed hands apparently, or at least the ownership on the assessors list is different than the ownership as stated by the gentleman who submitted a comment by
that's
email.
what I was addressing there. And my other question, just to make sure I'm understanding it correctly, which was asked by Steve from 276 Providence Road, is on the parking spots per unit. Is my understanding that there's enough space for 2 vehicles per unit, with one in the garage and one out in front of the garage? Is that accurate, Dan?
The off-street parking schedule in the village mixed use for a 3 or more bedroom is 2 spaces per unit. It does not specify whether or not they're in or outside. So,
but there's a parking spot you can't get out of when there's a car in the other space qualify.
Yep. My main question is, per the plans, it seems like each unit has 1 parking spot in the garage and 1 that would be right in front of the garage. That's
correct.
what it seems to be listed in the plans.
Yes, that is what is proposed.
Okay. That's it for me at the moment. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments from the board? And we had previously had a couple of comments submitted by email. Those are on record. If there's nothing else from the board at the moment, we do have a question from the public. And now might be a good time to get into that. So I guess, unless you want to read the question, Chris, I
can do that. Yep. So there's a question in the Q&A from Pete Wonar, and it says, I own 10 Main Street. Besides the change in aesthetics, what recourse do abutters have if we get water infiltration into our finished basements or property in general? P.S. The lot ownership name is several names behind on the town map. As stated by the chairman, we do work to make sure that those ownership records are up to date in our GIS, but it is an imperfect system, so we do what we can working with the mailings on that. I'll let you guys take it from there.
Is he currently getting water into his basement? Is that the question?
So the question is, what recourse do they have if they get water infiltration into the basement? So I don't know if you want to elaborate on the stormwater management plan or how that addresses it, and then I guess in regards to recourse, there's the I guess it would be a matter between.
And to Dan's question, Pete did answer just below that his basement is currently dry as a bone. To quote it, no, dry as a bone.
Okay.
Yes, I will.
Okay.
Let me chime in here. Pete is expressing a concern that is fairly common among abutters to a project, and the concern is that the project may disturb the water flow such that it directs more water onto an abutting property and potentially causes problems. Now, my understanding of the stormwater requirements are that the stormwater management on this site or any other site is required to not increase the rate of flow of water off the property. And if in fact it turns out that despite the best efforts of the design and construction, the water ends up flowing off the property at a greater rate than it did formerly, I presume there's some legal recourse. I've never had to get into the details of that, but the intent of the stormwater management standards is that the project not increase the rate of runoff off the property onto an abutting property.
Correct. That is correct. The pre and the post-development drainage flows need to, the post-development has to be at least equal to or less than the pre-development flow. This site, where it is extremely flat, and it is also the soils out there, it's a loamy sand. It's a very, very almost like a beach sand type situation, or not beach sand, but a very coarse sand, that when we did the drainage analysis, we found zero runoff coming from the site during pre-development. And we also, so we had to match that for a post-development, because where the site was so flat, everything that came out of the sky essentially infiltrated. So as far as for a post-development drainage analysis, is all the runoff from the site, including the roof from this building, goes into that subsurface drainage, the chambers that are there, so that we're not only meeting the pre-development and the post-development and pre-development flow rates, we're also meeting the recharge volumes. So essentially, on paper, there should be no increase or decrease in groundwater elevations. That being said, that's a very difficult thing to demonstrate. If we have a very wet season, you know, if there is a sump pump, and I believe the gentleman at 276 or 278 Providence Road said that he did have a sump pump in the area. You know, it is, whether or not it runs every year or only on the very, very wet springs, I don't know. That's very hard to demonstrate or prove.
And in the context of stormwater management, I will point out that the town retains Graves Engineering to review the applicant's stormwater design and calculations. So, you know, so we don't simply take their word for it. We, you know, on behalf of the town and the citizens of the town, we get the stormwater design reviewed to make sure that it meets our requirements and standards.
Graves is a very thorough engineer.
They are indeed.
Do a very good job.
Okay, so if I can move on, then we have a series of questions from Mr. Texera.
Yep. Would you like me to read them one at a time and address them one at a time, or all at once?
Yes, why don't we try that?
One at a time?
Yes.
So the first question is, what are abutter notification requirements? I received notice dated 4/21/2020 on Thursday, 4/23/2020 by regular mail. Is there a 14-day requirement or another time frame? Also, is notice by regular mail sufficient, or is there another method required? I feel many abutters may not have had opportunity to review and discuss. So, Mr. Chairman, if you will, I think I can respond to that one. There is the...
Since I don't remember the answers to that off the top of my head.
Yeah, so the 14-day requirement is for posting of notice in the newspaper, which was done. And then the abutter mailings also go out on that 14-day notice. So depending upon how long it takes to go through the mail, that's when they're received. But those are the statutory requirements of posting in the mail and by regular mail that are required for noticing. We also do post on our website, which is above and beyond the requirements, but also, you know, good form in terms of getting the notice out. So if you subscribe to the news and announcements, that does go out as well with the agenda. Should we move on to the second question?
Yes.
So would you clarify the zoning for this lot? Is there a number of units per 10,000 square feet regulation? Mr. Chairman, if you will, I can answer that one as well.
Please do.
So it's in the VMU district, and the number of units, as kind of previously discussed, we allow up to 8 units per acre, and then up to 16 by special permit. So those are the criteria for density of this specific lot. The third question, accident history at the emergency access point should be questioned based on curvature and hill. I don't know if, Dan, if you want to pitch in there, but just on my initial thoughts, if I can add them respectfully, would be that I'm not sure if there would be accident history on as the intersection isn't currently in existence. There wouldn't be any accident history specifically there, but if you want to speak to some of the Mass DOT data at nearby intersections, I don't know if that, would help.
As far as accident history, I'm not sure on that, but as far as I believe he's probably speaking about the Main Street side. We did look at the site distance in that on both sides, and we do meet site distance as required. The site distance on the Main Street side was a little bit less than on the Providence Road side, but we had on the Providence Road side, well, again, the Main Street side is not going to be a regular access. That'll be emergency only, but the site distance that we had using AASHTO standards was over 1,000 feet, well, between 900 and 1,000 feet on the Providence Road side. So as far as site distance goes, we do meet there. Required is 335 feet and up to 400 feet. So
looking at the plan, I'm not sure that I see anything that keeps it from being an exit or an entrance. Sometimes if you have an emergency access, it'll be gated or something like that. Are you just intending to have no exit signs be the control? I didn't hear you say.
So I believe that was discussed earlier, and we were going to work with the fire and police departments to get a recommendation of how best to address that. Emergency vehicle access only.
That's what, and might be helpful if we actually had something that showed those site distances, documented them and so on.
So the site distances for the intersections are included in the plan. I can actually bring those up. Let me see if I can share them. So at least the calculations are included. I don't know if you're looking for more information than the calculations, but it does show the speed limits and stopping site distances.
Okay, I was looking over at the Main Street end, not sure where you're.
Yeah, I can move to the.
Oh, way up there.
Yeah.
But I'm not.
So where the mouse is circling here is where it's shown on the plans as the Main Street stopping distance as well.
Well, I see. I see notation at the top, near the top right of this sheet, that talks about distances somewhere. I'm not sure where is it?
There's some stuff
Oh,
down
way
there.
down there. This really isn't the way to look at a plan. I got to tell you. Okay, way down there. I see it. Okay, anyway, it's documented.
All right, move on to the next question then, unless there's something more on this.
The fourth question, what is the proposed dumpster size for 8 units? I don't know if there's a standard in regards to that.
I believe on the detail sheet, we have a standard detail for a dumpster. I don't know it's a 6 foot by 6 foot dumpster. I'm not sure how, I mean, I don't know. Dave, do you have any input on that?
Are there standards for dumpster sizes per unit? On
No, I'm sorry, sir. I meant Dave Claro.
I know. I just thought I'd
Oh.
ask that question.
I mean, if there's some kind of recommendation, we can, we can follow it, but I don't know what size would be adequate for 8 off the top of my head. We could look into it.
Is the screening for it detailed here somewhere?
Yep, so I've pulled up on the share screen. You should be able to see it on your computer. It shows the dumpster detail here.
What sheet is that on? I'm looking here on my screen.
That's on the last sheet, sheet 6, of the site plan.
Oh, I see.
I'd say that looks like about a 6-yard dumpster for what that's worth.
Yeah, it's a 10 by 10 enclosure with cedar posts, and then the dumpster itself is proposed at 72 inch by 72 inch.
So that's 2 by 2 yards. That's four square yards. It's probably 1.5 yards in height, which would make it about a 6-yard dumpster, 6 cubic yards.
And it has an 8 foot high stockade fence around the outside of it.
Yeah, I have no clue what size dumpster is appropriate.
Yes, I mean, our regulations don't have any specific mention of size of dumpster other than showing that their location and screening.
Right, we don't regulate the size of the dumpster because the size of the dumpster depends upon how many users it has, how frequently it is picked up, and that's not something the board regulates.
And my understanding is this would be private trash collection, not through the town.
Yes. Yes, this is not the type of property that's served by the town and trash collection.
Correct, yes.
We do look at the screening, though, of the dumpster.
Yes, we look at the screening, but we don't concern ourselves with size or frequency of collection.
Well, I don't care about frequency, but I care about screening. And
yes.
I don't know what exactly. I see 8 foot high stockade fence,
Yeah.
Colored to be determined by architect. See detail. Which detail would I be seeing? Anyway, that's maybe we ought to be sure that we have the base covered.
Yeah. So I think we should move on to the next question.
Yep.
I do really just a clarification regarding an initial statement made about the site.
Yeah, I do want to make a quick comment that I do see in the attendees that and SBL raised their hand. I would just ask that they use the Q&A section. They can access that by the bar at the bottom of their screen, clicking on Q&A and entering a question if they had it. Question 5 proposed was clarification that the site is not next to Cumberland Farms. It is separated by 3 residences on both Main Street and Providence Road.
Yep.
Right, I just mentioned that as a general locus to give people, the members, a idea of the location of where the property was.
The 6th question concerns on road curvature for entrance on Providence Road and sightlines. I believe that was answered with our discussion on sightlines earlier. The 7th question, members are encouraged to come to property to view the site up close. Noted. And then question 8, does a recharge system affect the groundwater table?
Again, as discussed, that, where there was zero runoff from the site on pre-development, and it's assumed that everything that came from the sky would go into the ground. Now we're doing the same thing. Again, it's very difficult to judge what the groundwater is going to do from year to year. So it's
I think the important point there is that the design is intended to recharge all of the groundwater, that basically to maintain the same recharge post-development as it was pre-development. Not increase it, neither increase nor decrease.
Exactly.
So the development shouldn't have any change, any effect to it. There should be no water table change due to the development. Water tables do naturally go up and down with rainfall and all that good stuff, but the design of the development is intended to ensure that there's no change due to the development in the water table. Is that correct?
Yes.
And again, we have Graves Engineering reviewing that sort of thing on our behalf to sort of double check to make sure that, at least to the best of any engineer's ability, those conditions are satisfied.
Agreed. Yes, it's, like I said, it's a difficult thing it's variable year to year.
Yep. Okay. I don't see any additional questions from the public at this time. As previously noted, we will be continuing this hearing to a future date, at which there will be additional opportunity for public comment and participation, as we have tonight. So is there anything further from the board? I think the applicant has some homework to do, and in terms of picking a date to resume the hearing, that kind of depends upon when the applicant feels, when you feel that you will be ready to pick up on this discussion with us after having all the reviews done and any changes made in response to that.
I would like to see Graves' letter to know how long it's, I mean, can we continue it to the next meeting? And then if we get the letter and it's requires an additional one, that I email in and ask for a continuance at that point.
Yeah, that's one way to handle it. Our meeting schedule right now is we have a meeting 1 week from tonight, and it's pretty much guaranteed that you won't have any new information for us 1 week from tonight.
Exactly.
So the following meeting is on May 18th. That's 3 weeks from tonight. Yeah.
Yeah.
If we could. And that, that probably gives you time to see what Graves has said, and we can either resume the discussion at that time, or if you need more time to do further work, then you could request another continuation.
Okay, yeah, May 18th would be great if you could continue it to then, please.
All right. Hearing that, I'll move that we can accept the applicant's verbal request and expected written request via email or some other related form to continue the public hearing until May 18th at 7:30 p.m.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded to continue to May 18th. Any discussion of the motion? Hearing none. Mr. Hassinger.
Aye.
Ms. Hassinger.
Aye.
Mr. Wood.
Aye.
Mr. Venkatraman.
Aye.
Mr. Robbins votes aye. The motion is carried unanimously. This hearing is continued. I wish to thank everybody for their participation, and we'll look forward to making more progress on this on May 18th.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I do have a brief point of order, Mr. Chair, and primarily for Chris. I just tuned my TV over to our Grafton channel briefly, and it is showing a black screen on our live broadcast right now.
Okay. Yeah, I did.
I'll let you know.
Thank you. I'll note that I did keep this recording. So even if it's not live, we will have the recording backed up, and I will send that. So we will have the full meeting in a recorded fashion, if not live. I know that they've been working to set that live feature up, and This was, I believe, the first one that's using that feature, so we may still have some items to work out on that end.
Yeah, there might be a bug or two to work out there, but anyway, thanks for pointing that out for what it's worth. And I guess we can move on to our next hearing, which is another new hearing, a request for a special permit and site plan approval at 5 Waterville Street. So, Mr. Wood.
All right. Pursuant to sections 1.3.3 and 1.5.7 of the Town of Grafton zoning bylaws, the planning board will hold a public hearing on Monday, April 27th, 2020, commencing at 7:30 p.m. to consider a special permit application and site plan approval for the conversion of a single-family dwelling and veterinarian business into a 2-family dwelling on property located at 5 Waterville Street, Grafton Assessors Map 27, Lot 87. Said property is located in a medium-density residential R20 district. The applicant/owner is Julia T. Rondo. Copies of the application and plan are available for public inspection on the Town of Grafton website at www.grafton-ma.gov on the Planning Department Development Projects webpage. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March stay-at-home advisory, this meeting will be conducted via remote participation. Please see www.grafton-ma.gov/planning-dashboard for more information.
Okay, so Ms. Rando, can you introduce yourself and describe your project for us?
Absolutely. Good evening, everybody. I'm Julia Rando. I currently own the single-family dwelling at 5 Waterville. It is zoned as an R20, and it had the special permit for the veterinary office. So when I bought the property in September of 2016, that use was grandfathered in. I did run the veterinary office. I started in January of 2017. Around the end of last year, we kind of weaned off of that, and it's closed at this time. So in 2019, I did add additional parking to accommodate the growing business. So there is plenty of parking on site at this time. But like I said, at this time, the veterinary office is closed. So what I am proposing and requesting the special permit for is to convert the veterinary office instead of an office into a 3-bedroom and 1.5 bathroom unit. And the front part of the house, the older part of the house, is a 3-bedroom, 2-bath. So essentially, I would like to get the permit to reclassify this as a 2-family dwelling. I feel that with proposing the new use of the property, it's actually going to almost downgrade the use of the property. When I was running the vet office full time, obviously 5 days a week at least, there is a lot of traffic in and out, foot traffic and car traffic. Also, as far as utilities go, the house already has town water and town sewer, so we would not have to make any alterations to those utilities. As far as refuse, I think also, it's a downgrade in the use of the property, so I'm not running a business out of here. There should be less issues with any kind of trash or recycling in that case. And as I stated earlier, there is quite a bit of parking. So the driveway on the northeast part of the property is a 4-car, and on the southwest side, the new parking lot can accommodate 5 cars. So that would be a total of 9 cars for the 2 units, 2-family dwelling. In addition, the project will only make interior changes, and the plans for that were submitted, so you guys should have access to this. There are no changes to the exterior footprint of the house at all, and there will be no need to do anything different with any of the landscaping or anything like that. That was already done last year with the initial project. Yeah, so that is the site plan from last year when we were putting the parking in. So as you can see, that lot is existing now, and we did do all the appropriate drainage for the water since it's a water overlay district. So that is now currently what is present.
Yeah, so what we have here is essentially a change in use.
Correct.
It was and is currently a single family with a office.
Correct, attached.
And it is proposed to be a 2-family with no exterior changes whatsoever.
That's correct.
So, any comments or thoughts from the planner, Chris?
No, so I think that as described, it's a fairly straightforward change in use request. Um, uh, in my comment letter, I think I noted everything appears to be in order and including the waivers and such that the board would have to vote on. But given the scope of the proposed work and being all interior, a reduction in intensity of use, obviously I'll defer to the board in that regard, but I feel that the application is in order.
And this use is allowed by special permit in this zoning district. So this is, you know, this is completely within the parameters of the zoning bylaw.
Any problem with it?
Any questions or comments from the board?
And one question, it's not very clear. So on the proposed picture, what is that the box at the entrance? What is written there? I can't read the font.
This is actually the new parking area. Is this what you're referring to?
Oh, it's a parking. Okay, okay.
The parking that we put in last year. So these were the plans I had drawn up last year when I was going through the whole process to add additional parking. So this is actually now existing.
Okay, okay. It just was not clear. The font is a bit smudged in the image, so it's not clear what exactly it is.
Yeah, I couldn't read all of that on what we got either. I need to have clean PDFs if we have to look at them this way. No, go ahead.
My one question is just a little bit different. Without knowing exactly anything about how a typical veterinary business runs in this regard, is there going to be anticipated more water sewer use in the residential use of the property than there would be in the veterinary property?
The same or less. I mean, when I'm in full swing, working 5 or 6 days a week from the home office, you know, I'm using quite a bit of water and sewer, and I feel that, I guess compared to the months that I wasn't using it, I mean, it went up probably at least probably more than doubled. So I feel that if it's just a family living here, it will be less water and sewer usage.
Yeah. I'm basing the question on compared to a full swing veterinary business and compared to a typical use residential usage.
I would say the veterinary business uses more water and more sewer.
So
yeah,
depends on the size of the family.
True, but I mean, it's only going to be a 3-bedroom, so.
I was trying to make out in the application, there's a drawing where there's a unit on the right that has lots of detail, and then on the left it says not in scope.
Right. So that's
down below, there's a plan that has less detail on the right, but more detail on the left. Is it the on the left is currently a residence?
Yep. So that's currently my living residence, and it's a 3-bed, 2-bath. That's not in the scope of the project.
But it'll be one of the two.
Correct. It would be one of the 2 units.
Yeah.
I mean, the plan right now is that I will be living here. So.
Right. Yeah. Oh, it is? You will be?
I mean, I currently live here, so
Well,
not going anywhere at this time.
Nope, you're just looking to have another family move in next door.
Correct. Basically, since I don't have the vet business anymore, I just want to do something with that area there that would be productive.
Yep. All right. Any other questions, comments from the board? Do we have any comment or question from any member of the public? As a reminder, for the public to submit a question, please use the Zoom Q&A feature. And I don't see any popping up here, but we'll give people just a moment to react and type if they want to.
I'll just, Mr. Chairman, if I may take a quick minute while we're seeing if any questions come in. As part of that live video feature that we're working on, I'll just note that they are also working to set that up where we'll be allowed to have callers similar to a radio talk show, if you will, where they'll control live audio for public to call in. It does not seem like we have all the bugs fixed yet, so we don't have that feature at this time, but that is something that we are working on implementing. So,
And I think in a way, Chris, you just answered the question that popped up, or sort of answered it.
yeah, in the future there is going to be that call-in feature. Obviously, we can work through the Q&A as needed for now, and then other ways of communicating with the board. Obviously, any kind of written mail we'll add to the record, and also email through the website is another feature that could be used. But for in-person direct communication during the meetings, the Q&A is currently the preferred feature.
So we're still, in a way, we're still getting used to running meetings this way. And we do not know how long we will continue to operate this way, but as we go on, well, hopefully we'll develop the best ways we can for the public to participate. So I don't see any other Q&A from the public regarding this particular project. I've not heard any issues remaining open on this. So is there something else anything else from the board here? I think I saw Bob raise his hand.
Well, I'm waiting to make a motion.
Okay. I guess now might be a good time for a motion.
Okay, I'll move that we close the hearing and direct staff to prepare a draft decision, taking into account all of the information that we have acquired.
And second.
Okay, moved and seconded that this hearing be closed and staff be directed to draft a decision. Any discussion of the motion? Hearing none. We'll vote. Mr. Hassinger.
Aye.
Ms. Hassinger. Aye. Mr. Wood.
Aye.
Mr. Venkatraman.
Aye.
Mr. Robbins, aye. Declare the motion carried unanimously. This hearing is closed. Staff will draft a decision, and when a draft decision is ready at a future meeting of the board, if we're really lucky, it'll be a week from tonight, but it might not be till May 18th, depending on staff's workload. The board will then deliberate on the decision and ultimately vote on the decision, and it'll go from there.
Thank you.
So thank you for your participation and for your patience through all of this meeting. And I think we have one more public hearing on our schedule. Consult my agenda here, yes. And I know some people have been waiting for this one at 80 Snow Road, lot number 2. So we will begin this public hearing with a reading of the legal notice. Mr. Wood.
Yes. So pursuant to sections 1.3.3 of the Grafton zoning bylaws, the planning board will hold a public hearing on Monday, April 27, 2020, commencing at 7:30 p.m. to consider the application for a special permit and site plan approval for a detached 2-family dwelling on property located at 80 Snow Road, lot number 2, as shown on Grafton Assessor's map 28, lot 66. Said property is located in a medium density residential R20 zone. The applicant owner is 163 LLC. Copies of the application and plan are available for public inspection on the Town of Grafton website at www.grafton-ma.gov on the Planning Department Development Projects webpage. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March stay-at-home advisory, this meeting will be conducted via remote participation. Please see www.grafton-ma.gov/planning-board for more information.
Okay, so here on behalf of the project, we have
so I would note we have a couple applicants here. I believe they've used the same link, so it just says All of them say James Tatro, Thompson Liston. I would just ask that they identify who they are for the record.
Sure. Chris, this is James Tatro from Thompson Liston Associates. I'm
How's it
on just via phone. And I'm here representing 163 LLC, is the applicant before you, asking for a special permit with site plan approval for the construction of a duplex at Lot 2, 80 Snow Road. The assessor parcel designation of map 28 parcel 66 is actually all of 80 Snow Road. But back in August of last year, the board signed an A&R plan which created lots numbers 2 and 3. It also made a minor alteration to the lot on the corner of Greeny Drive and Snow Road. That is effectively on that A&R plan lot 1, but that was an existing lot. It was just altered slightly per that A&R plan. As I say, the application is because we are in the R20 medium density district and proposing a duplex. That use is required to get a special permit. We are going to have access. The lot is on, I should say, is on the easterly side of Snow Road. It's shortly north of where Snow Road hits the Mass Pike, and it's just above where the railroad crosses Snow Road. The lot would have its own access driveway off of Snow Road, just below the intersection with Greeny Drive. It would be a duplex with that driveway. We are also in the groundwater protection district, and so we're dealing with all of the required storm events. We're proposing on the south side of the driveway that will serve the duplex a very large infiltration structure, including 51 R902 Cultec chambers. And we are proposing a Vort Sentry catch basin at the side of the driveway to capture some of the driveway runoff in order that we can make our numbers for all of the storms 2, 10, 25, and 100 years of events meet the existing condition. Now, just to digress just a little bit, the existing condition, we looked at the aerial photos, and there was previously a small home and driveway on this property that somewhere between 2009 and 2012 was torn down. And that's what we're comparing to the existing condition. I'm not sure the exact date, again, of the raising of that structure, but it was somewhere in that range. And what we show with our drainage report submitted with the application is that by setting all of the roof runoff and part of the driveway runoff that has gone through the Vort Sentry unit, which removes total suspended solids, into a total of 51 Cultec R902 chambers, we reduce the runoff such that the overall infiltration structure will only have pipe to discharge just beginning in the 25-year storm event, and will have some in the 100-year storm event. But in the smaller storm events, 2-year, 10-year, and things like today, you wouldn't have any outflow from those pipes. This proposed duplex is not would not be incongruous in this area. You have some other duplexes in this area. You have a mix of homes. You have some more expensive, some more modest. This would not be something that's going to detract from people's property values. And we have also filed with the Conservation Commission for a stormwater permit as required for alteration. And we are going to have to be satisfying them as to the, again, as to the infiltration structure and as to the nature of erosion control, et cetera, on site. But I would just be brief. It's been a long meeting. We're not proposing anything very unusual. It's simply a regular duplex to be sold in the market. No particular requirement for ownership. And we are here before you because it is a requirement under the zoning bylaw for the R20 district that we've got to get a special permit. I'll try and answer any questions that you have about this or anything to do with the project.
Okay, you have any initial comments, Chris?
No, I think Just important to note on the plans that are submitted, this application is just for Lot 2 currently. So although Lot 3 is shown as a developed condition, that would not be a part of this current application.
That was a moment of confusion on my part when I first looked at the plan, and I read a little bit more and I realized, yeah, the plan shows something that's not part of the special permit application. But what we pay attention to is Lot 2. Any questions or comments initially from the board?
No, I was pretty puzzled by a couple of things about that. The plan is just hopeless. Some of the other materials that I saw spoke of development of both lots 2 and 3, and it's shown on this plan. We're going to have to be very clear about what we are or are not approving. And I asked Chris whether there would be a special permit required for lot 3, and maybe he can explain the answer to that. When a time comes, if not now.
Yes, so my understanding of the proposal for Lot 3 is that that would be considered under the Dover Amendment as educational, and so that location would trigger site plan, but the special permit for the use would be protected.
Well, what I see here doesn't say anything about something that qualifies for Dover. I see proposed duplex, and I think it's residential when they say that.
So the current proposal before the board is for only Lot 2, and that is for the duplex residential. Lot 3, which is not before the board right now, it hasn't been applied for, but my understanding is that some of the intentions are, it would come before the board as a site plan, but not trigger the special permit requirements other than in regards to drainage. But that hasn't been submitted yet. It is before conservation currently, but has not been submitted to the board. So we're really only looking at Lot 2 under the current submission.
I also noticed that there's some written concerns or inputs that raise concerns. And I see over in Q&A that I think someone else is concerned that they made submissions and they are not on the, well, we don't have them to look at.
Yeah, we can address that when we get to the public comment section, but just initially I'll say that I know that we have today up until even potentially 15 minutes ago or 15 minutes of the meeting start, we're receiving written comments. So although they were all received, in order to post them to the actual website, it's not always feasible to do that close to the meeting time, but they will all be included in the record, anything that's sent to the board.
Well, but I'm concerned about that because I want to know what people are saying.
Yeah, I can go to the exhibits and show, let me just do that real quick, what is on right now for the exhibits. So on the website, we have currently public comment, Andrew Burton.
Yeah, I've seen 13 and 14.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so there is, per the conversation on the Q&A, there is at least one public comment that had been submitted through the website that has not yet made it to be posted on this particular page on the web. But right, I think we can be assured that the comment will not be. It takes time for it to flow through the system, shall we say. Every comment we receive does become a part of the record, and before the hearing is closed, every comment should be addressed in one way or another.
Yeah, the thing is, when we're doing the meeting this way, it's a little bit different than what we usually do. We usually have written comments that we look at, and then we have people come to the meeting and speak and give us input, and we have that in order to be able to conduct our hearing. In this case, only the written comments are available to us. We can't hear the people, so we're not really replicating people at the public hearing being able to make their inputs, so that at least I can hear them and know.
All right.
Well, again, I mean, I don't want to get too far into the public Q&A until that's the time, but I guess we can answer that one real quickly. That one of the comments is that they can try to recreate their comments in the Q&A if that is helpful. I would ask that they probably try to limit it to questions, as the comments will at some point be put into the record. But if that's helpful to the board, we can ask them to add their comments to the chat or the Q&A. But again, it will be added to the record.
Preferably the Q&A, I think.
Yep. So aside from issues relating to comments from the public, which we do want to get to, do members of the board have any questions or comments about this project?
Chair, I have one question. I'm not following. What is the request, or why is the request for the waiver for the site plan requirements? Can someone explain that?
Sorry. So the questions is
on the town planner's note,
Yeah.
under waiver request, there is the site plan requirements. That's been requested as a waiver. So I'm not too sure I really follow why is there a request to request for waiver for site plan requirements.
So there were waivers requested for specific site plan criteria that's included in the application package. I didn't want to go through and cite every specific one. But I can pull up the waiver request, and we can look at the actual
item that has been requested.
Item in the site plan requirements that are requested. The two that are requested is landscaping and lighting, and their comments being that only simple lawn landscaping is proposed and no additional lighting is proposed. So I'll just bring those up on screen share quickly.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Are there other questions or comments from the board?
I did have one question, at least from my end, is there a reason the applicant does not believe there's any plantings screening necessary between the properties that are on Greeny Drive and this property?
If I may, in answer to that one, this property is actually more distant from the properties on Greeny Drive, I believe, than they are from each other. It at the very least, it's not closer. So it was difficult to see why that density did not require additional screening, but this would.
Yeah, my thought process for the development that's on Greeny Drive as well is that a lot of the plantings on those properties that were done at construction time anyway were side and front yard, and this is going to be basically backyard views from those properties as well. So it could be a different type of viewing compared to what it used to be as far as, seeing into another house or another house seeing into them. That was my, overall thought. So I didn't know if there was more reason than just the distance for screening.
Nothing more to it than that.
Okay.
Anything else from the board at this point? Well, then why don't we move on to the public comments and the Q&A?
Yep. So I'll just kind of take a quick moment to note that some of the people signed on. This one's from an anonymous attendee. We are just asking that you include a note of your name and address, just for the record and for the minutes. I'll defer to the board if we want to wait for them to identify further questions, or if we want to go ahead with that as well.
I would prefer for a question to be identified by the submitter, and I don't think we should answer a question that we don't know who it's from.
Okay.
That's right. That's right. We always in our hearings require name and address.
Yep.
And here it's a written input, but it's the same principle.
So I'll leave that up. If they want to identify, that's something that can be done. And then we can address that. But I will note the first one that's noted, Gregory sorry if I mispronounced this name, Puchel. Lot 3 is also going to have a duplex, which will mean we will have 2 duplexes within a very small space. And this is not the norm in the area. I'll let anyone else add to it if they want, but as we noted, the current proposal is just for Lot 2 duplex. So the approval would just be for the Lot 2 duplex. Additional approvals from the planning board would be needed for Lot 3.
I think we can take that comment as an observation, and right now we're dealing with Lot 2, and that's it.
Adding to that, the same respondent, Gregory Puchel, Lot 2 is directly behind my home, and I'm very concerned about the development. So similarly, if anyone wants to add to that.
I think the board notes the concern, and we try to take note of everybody's concerns. How that ultimately affects our decision, we'll see. But it is part of the record, and the board does acknowledge the concerns of the abutters and anybody else. And it appears we have another anonymous comment, which I think we will have to wait for the commenter to identify themselves.
So this is a question from Mike. Why are we only dealing with Lot 2 today and not with both lots as a whole? I don't know if the applicant wishes to elaborate, but I would just say that the current application as it was submitted is only for the approval of Lot 2.
Right, the board is dealing with what's submitted for us, and we're not going. I don't know that it's our role to question why only Lot 2 is being submitted. It's the choice of the applicant. I also have to say I'm a little bit uncomfortable accepting the questioner's identification as simply as Mike.
Right.
We in our normal public hearings, we get full names and usually addresses of the persons making public comments or asking questions. So I tend to pay less attention to a comment from someone who's not willing to fully identify themselves.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to also note in regard to this issue that we were uncertain as to whether a filing for a special permit was required for Lot 3, and the owner of Lot 3 I believe, had his attorneys actually consult with town council as to whether it was required. And upon town council saying that it was not in that instance, we did not file for that lot.
Well, is that a special permit in order for you to develop lot 2, or is that making a decision about whatever the future project on lot 3 would be?
That, Mr. Hassinger, that was in regard to lot 3. That's what the question has arisen. Why are you only filing for lot 2 and not also for lot 3? And the answer is that we were not, in fact, certain which ones if we were required to file for lot 3. And the owner of that lot actually, his attorney consulted with town council, and the decision that they arrived at is that that such a filing is not required for the use on lot 3.
And Chris, I'd like us to know about that from council.
Yeah, I believe I can coordinate and get that correspondence from town council and add it.
Thank you.
Yep.
I agree. Comments from people who aren't identifying themselves, like Mike, are just not, I'd love to talk to people, but not in the context of a formal public.
Yes, I will note in the Q&A, Mike has identified himself as Mike Derry. He apparently couldn't put it, he didn't know how to add his full name when he signed on to the Q&A or to the meeting. And so just for the record, for anybody else who, for whatever reason, got signed on with something less than their full name, you can always type your full name in the question or comment. And you know, we do appreciate it. So now we know Mike is Mike Derry, and I appreciate that, Mike. Thank you. Any other, or do we have any questions still open? No.
Sorry, let me just go through a few of these. I have to, I'm gonna dismiss the ones that weren't identified. So we have one more, again, from Gregory Puchel. We had asked that he recreate his comments here. So he says, I respectfully offer the following considerations in order of importance, preference. Reconsider this development project altogether based on the disruptive and invasive effects to current neighboring properties, i.e. not doing the project at all. Replan to move the proposed building as far as possible into its lot to provide the maximum space between current home properties. And then 3, in addition to the previous item, number 2, mitigate the loss of privacy to my property via additional physical means, including a high fence, e.g. one is that high enough to provide an effective screen for a 2-story structure that runs the length of the shared property line between my property and that of the new development. I spoke with my neighbors at 2 Greeny Drive this past weekend, and they have already secured commitment from the developer to provide this for them. So I don't know.
Chris, if I could just note in response to that comment, you know, the required side setback is only 15 feet, and we're providing, I believe it's 30 feet. If you just at a glance, if you look at where the proposed duplex is on lot 2, it is actually pretty well centered within the larger contiguous area of that lot. I sympathize with the commenter's question. Everyone would like to have their neighbors pushed maybe a little further away from them, but I think it's actually a pretty reasonable location.
Am I missing someplace where we would see screening on this plan? Because screening and buffering is one of the items we have to vote on.
Let me pull up.
I'll say in my read of the plan, I did not notice any screening items.
With the way these plans are, I'm having a little.
It does not hurt to be explicit.
So I did pull up for the benefit of those, not with video right now. I have pulled up the plans as proposed. I did not see a detail of any specific screening along the edge of lot 2, as we've kind of discussed. You can see this is the Mr. Puchel's property. As noted, there is the 30-foot setback to the property line.
So as to the applicant, there's no plan to do any screening over there?
To the board, I believe actually didn't the question itself say that the commenter had spoken to applicant and gotten an agreement to do, I forget whether the commenter said fencing or screening, but
so the comment noted that that the the property owners of 2 Greeny Drive had secured written commitment from the developer to provide fencing along their property boundary. The request was for a similar commitment along the neighboring property at, I believe it was lot 6.
thank you for the clarification. To the board, we would have no objection to a similar commitment along the property line behind Mr. Puchel. As you get further to the lot to the east, that lot actually you're starting to become significantly higher than this lot. I think it's actually would be much more relevant towards the property of Mr. Puchel. And again, I'm sorry if I'm also mispronouncing his name.
Yeah, I wonder if we could have in our record what those commitments are.
Yeah, I was just going to ask that as well.
Hmm?
I was just going to ask or suggest that as well, to have something written in our records that say that there is a commitment by the developer to provide fencing of whatever specifications were committed to for both the lot 1 on the plan of 2 Greeny, I believe it was, and Mr. Puchel's property.
Yeah, I
what you're
think
discussing right now.
it's probably fair, given that the issue was raised as a comment or question from the public, that the record should reflect anything that is known about how that comment and what the response is to that comment.
Hi, James Benincasa. I'm actually on this call too. I'm the developer. I did work out a deal with the owner of Lot 2 to put a fence up. The owner, I just kicked out of my screen. Lot 4, there is already a fence in the back of that yard, and that was what they were we were simulating going across. When we bought land from the guy on Lot 2, and when they did that, we actually gave him. We bought some side yard and we gave him some yard in the back. That's why you can see how the property line jogs way back, further than lot 4. When we did that, we agreed to then give him a fence going across that, and some screening. So that was the reason for that. It wasn't, that's why we did that. It's because we bought some land from them.
The plans I'm looking for don't help me find lot 2 and lot 4 and lot whatever. I don't know why.
He misspoke. He should have. I'm sorry, Mr. Hassinger. He should have referred that the Mr. Puchel, who I believe is is he number 4 or is he number 6, Chris?
I believe it was. Sorry, let me look back.
I'm furiously looking through the butter notices here. He must be number 4. Burton is number 6. So what it was agreed to was that when property, there was a property exchange with the property at the corner of Greenie Drive, an agreement was made that that property on the corner of Greenie Drive and Snow Road would get the same fencing as the property of, and I'm sorry if I pronounce it wrong, Mr. Pichel at number 4 Greenie Drive. And so I guess the applicant is a little perplexed that the question comes in of this party, Mr. Pichel at number 4 Greenie Drive, asking for the same fence when he, as he understood it, believes it's already there.
Well, it's not on our record, is it? None of that is on our.
I'll comment that in the Q&A, Mr. Pichel does mention the fence is currently on 2 Greenie Drive, and he has no fence at 4 Greenie.
I want the comments and the drawing to have the same references so that I know what we're talking about. I see lot 1 at the corner of Snow Road and Greenie. I see lot 2, the one we're talking about tonight. I don't see any other lot numbers that are helpful in this discussion.
So if I may recommend, if the applicant's amenable, it may be good to add revisions to the plans to show the existing fencing and proposed fencing, and doing that along, in line with the concerns that are submitted tonight in regards to Mr. Pichel's property.
Certainly.
So that, at least for the moment, deals with several of the questions that we had regarding the fence and which lot has fence and which lot does not, which lot will get fence.
Should I continue with public comments at this point?
Yes, I think it looks like we have several comments in the Q&A that I think have been answered to the best of the ability right now regarding the fences.
Yeah, I think I'll read a few of them just to catch up. This is from Gregory Pichel again. All natural barriers have been removed with clear cut, and the view is dramatically altered as I will be looking at an unobstructed view of the building. The fence is on 2 Greenie. I have no fence at 4 Greenie. Dismiss those. We have and then he asks who I can call on the board following this meeting to clarify information. I would direct him to contact the planning department via the website, and we'll answer those questions as much as possible. If he provides we don't have access, we're working remotely, so I don't have access directly to phone. But if he leaves a phone number, I can contact him in that way. We have a comment from Tracy and Timothy Grady from 3 Tracy Ann Drive. First off, we strongly disagree with proposing these lots individually. When this is a small lot split into 2 encompassing many issues, there is a railroad crossing and blind corner at the proposed driveway. Will anything be done from a safety standpoint for pedestrian and automobile traffic on Snow Road?
If I may, in response to that question, Snow Road in its existing condition is not especially amenable to pedestrian traffic, and there are no proposed changes to Snow Road's layout.
If I may, Mr. Chair, I travel Snow Road a lot. I have family that lives further near the top of Greenie Drive, and my commentary on that is I frequently see people either jogging or walking dogs along Snow Road, even though there is no sidewalks. So whether or not it is necessarily amenable to pedestrian traffic, there is pedestrian traffic there. I just wanted to make that comment.
And I don't know what, if anything, can be done or would be appropriate to be considered regarding safety with respect to a new driveway off of Snow Road for a two-family house. It's a fairly low traffic situation. I don't know whether there's anything meaningful that can be done, but the comment should be at least considered. There is, the question about safety has been raised. Hopefully an answer of some kind or another can be arrived at for that. And we've had a fair amount of discussion already regarding the question of doing these two lots separately, and apparently on advice of town council that it seemed to make a certain amount of sense from some perspective, and Chris has already talked about following up on that so that the board can get some clarity as to why the situation is what it is. Anything, I don't know if there's anything more to be said at this point on that.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, one other just quick comment is that just the nature of this construction, putting in the two driveways, will end up removing some of the vegetation it's a little bit of topography that limits sight distance going around the corner of Snow Road.
Worth noting. I think our next Q&A from the public is another comment on the fence, just clarifying an existing fence.
Yep, so that's a comment from Thomas, sorry again if I mispronounced, Giuseppe, 2 Greeny. We have some fencing in the back and it is 8-foot stockade. We have a comment from Andrew Burton. He asked that his written comments be read aloud. I'll defer to the board if that's something they wish to have happen.
I'm trying to figure out which comments those were.
I believe those are comments as part of the uploaded record. Let me go back. Yes.
You're right.
So those are Exhibit 13.
Exhibit 13 is the one being referenced by this.
Oh, okay.
If the board wishes, I'm, as clerk, willing to read it, but I will defer to the will of the chair of the board.
Yes, well, the comment is a part of the record and the applicant has access to it. However, on request of the audience, I wouldn't mind if it was read. If the rest of the board is agreeable to that. Hearing no objection.
All right. Commentary submitted by Andrew Burton, 6 Greeny Drive, received by the Planning Department April 27th, 2020. The proposed project at 80 Snow Road is very concerning to me as a property abutter. In October of 2010, the property was purchased by a family who had planned to build a single-family home in alignment with all the other surrounding single-family homes. For unknown reasons to me, construction of the single-family home never commenced, and it appears the property was sold to 163 LLC on or around May 16th, 2019. It is my understanding that the lot originally purchased by 163 LLC was large enough to build one two-family home or a single duplex. At some point, I suspect the developers realized that they could maximize their profits by squeezing in a second two-family home or duplex. But unfortunately for 163 LLC, the acreage they purchased was insufficient to do this. To solve this problem, it appears the 163 LLC bought land from 2 Greeny Drive only for quote acreage end quote purposes so that they could squeeze in a second duplex. With no intent to use the property of 2 Greeny Drive, which is zoned for single family use, it is contrary to the spirit and intent of the zoning ordinance to purchase land with no intention of use, just to satisfy the acreage requirements. I recommend before this project gets the green light to move forward, that the town investigates this purchase. Did the property owners of 2 Greeny Drive even understand the motives of 163 LLC in that the land sale would result in 2 duplexes on such a small piece of land, or were they told that just 1 duplex was being built? In closing, my biggest concern as an abutter to the 80 Snow Road project is the lack of general compatibility with the adjacent properties and other properties in this community. The increased light and sound pollution that will result from 4 families on such a small lot doesn't make sense. Andrew S. Burton, 6 Greeny Drive.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, as I said at the beginning of the presentation, the board signed an A&R plan back in August of last year, and that A&R plan, the application of it, included signature from the owner at 2 Greeny Drive. This was not in some way kept from that person.
Any other comments on this public comment?
There's one more. This is from Tracy Grady, who was identified earlier. Snow Road is a major cut through for the entire town. This driveway can and will cause accidents if the motor vehicle turns left. I don't know if the applicant wants to address that further at this time. I will note the time is 9:30. And just before we get too far, we do need to have a vote at some point if we're going to extend the meeting past 10 o'clock.
Yes, I might hope that the meeting will be able to conclude before 10 o'clock, but as 10 o'clock gets closer, we will deal with it.
9:59 or less. We can.
And Mr. Chairman, just to respond to the question of site distance, again, I would point out that the location where especially the driveway for Lot 2 is coming out, by having that driveway come out, it's actually going to not through this as being a designed intention, but it will increase the site distance available for cars traveling northward on Snow Road towards the intersection with Greeny Drive, because it will remove some of the obstruction of site distance that is there in that location at the bend of the property of the lot on the corner.
Yeah, the concern as I read it from the question and answer from this resident was that for heading southeasterly on Snow Road, so in the opposite direction for when the car is turning left.
It would, I mean, are you talking about traffic already on Snow Road, or is the commenter saying that he's concerned about a driver leaving the lot?
Concerned about existing traffic on Snow Road colliding with a new driver from this driveway.
Sure. Well, the simple creation and grading and of that driveway will also increase the site distance for somebody who has either turned left from Greeny Drive onto Snow Road and going south, or who has been on Snow Road going south already. It will also increase the site distance there because, again, you're going to end up removing some of the vegetative and topographic obstruction right at that bend of the road on the inside of the curve.
I know, because I've become disconnected here.
Okay, I think the board should take note of that question and review, any relevant information regarding traffic in general, I guess. It occurs to me, I'm sorry, I'm sort of changing the subject here, but early in the discussion, there was some talk about how the stormwater was being managed. I don't recall whether Graves Engineering has been engaged to review the stormwater for this.
No, I don't believe it, that this triggered the stormwater review, but if that's something that the board feels necessary, we can forward that.
I'll say for myself, I would love if Graves did. I know, at least in past years, not this current year, but the property immediately opposite Greeny Drive has frequently flooded from the runoff along the whole hill. So it would be useful, at least to me, to see Graves review of this property with regards to stormwater and the nearby water resources that are in the area.
Yeah, I bring this up because the applicant did include, let me just double check. Yeah, the applicant did include drainage reports and drainage calculations and made a point of discussing how the proposed drainage design will keep water on the property. You know, given the extent to which that drainage design is a part of this, I think it would be helpful for the board to have sort of an independent review of that drainage design just to validate it. And while this may not trigger the stormwater review through the Conservation Commission, I think the stormwater standards apply equally to a special permit, even when there is no Concom jurisdiction.
Mr. Chairman, on behalf of the applicant, we already did file for a stormwater permit from the Conservation Commission.
So that
it was required.
You know, I think I remember you mentioning that. In which case, yes, that review that review will happen through the Conservation Commission.
We are to be before them on May 5th.
Good. I think that satisfies that question of mine.
And just to be explicit on my end, I'm happy very much so to defer to the Conservation Commission's expertise in reviewing stormwater rather than me trying to comprehend it well.
Right, and that's our standard operating procedure that, that Concom reviews most stormwater things except when a project is too small to trigger a Concom review of stormwater, in which case our requirements still apply even when the project is not sufficient to trigger Concom. But when Concom does the stormwater review, we rely on their review.
So, Mr. Chairman, if I may, we do have another public comment which may be useful at this time, if I can recognize it.
Yes, I think that would be appropriate.
So this is, again, Gregory Puchel for Greeny Drive. With such a large amount of concern being voiced here from both Greeny Drive and Tracy Ann, and the fact that we cannot speak to each other in real time, what does this mean in terms of ruling on this tonight? Should we take more time to vet through everything with all parties?
And I think we were just getting to the point of planning a continuation. Because as has just been noted, the applicant is still before Concom with review. And there are a number of questions that, and answers may need to be documented. There's clarifications regarding fencing and updating plans to show fencing and or landscaping. So there's some homework that still needs to be done. I don't think, the board normally does not close a public hearing until we've, at the very least, we've received and reviewed the Concom's decisions on stormwater. So this was going to have to remain open, so that, answering the questioner's point, that we are not ruling on this tonight. We are, at this point, we are gathering information, documenting questions, documenting answers where they are available, and I think unless there's more that we can productively do tonight, I would suggest that the time may have come to plan to continue this hearing to a subsequent meeting.
Mr. Chairman, on behalf of the applicant, I would request that the board please continue this hearing to its meeting, I believe on May 18th. We will not have been before the Conservation Commission before your next meeting on May 4th. So we would have to ask to continue to your May 18th meeting if the board would please allow us.
I move that we accept the applicant's verbal request and anticipated written request to continue the meeting until May 18th at 7:30 p.m. The public hearing until May 18th at 7:30 p.m.
Second.
Moved and seconded that we accept the applicant's request to continue to May 18th. Is there any discussion of the motion? Hearing none. Mr. Hassinger.
Aye.
Ms. Hassinger.
Aye.
Mr. Wood.
Aye.
Mr. Venkatraman,
Aye.
Mr. Robbins, aye. Motion carried unanimously. I will point out for the benefit particularly of the members of the public who've been interested in this, that we will very gladly continue to accept public comments, written comments submitted via the planning board website at any time between now and the next meeting. I would encourage commenters to get their comments in sooner rather than later so that we and the applicant have ample time to read and understand and respond to them. And thank you for everybody participating in this. I really value everybody's participation. And we will be back here on the 18th.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Again, thank you all for participating. And now, let me see. We have a little bit of an agenda left to go.
Mr. Chairman, if I may request one item out of order, going to action items C. I know that we have Mr. Kotosh has been waiting here, and I did promise him an early meeting because he was at the top of the agenda. I may have been mistaken in that regard, so.
Yeah, things somehow don't always go quite as we hope they will or plan to, but yes, I think by all means, let's take that up. So this would be an action item to determine a minor modification to the special permit at 100 Milford Road. So if you can explain to us what's before us here.
Well, good evening, first of all, and thank you for your time this evening. My name is Norm Kotosh from NAK Management and Consulting, and I'm here on behalf of Merritt Hill Capital 73 Grafton, Grafton, Massachusetts, LLC. They're recent purchasers of the property located at 100 Milford Road. It's being managed by a third party called CubeSmart. If you're familiar with it, the location there. And we're just asking that there be a minor or a determination that there's a minor modification. We're requesting that the outdoor storage of vehicles continue to be permitted at the back of the property. There will be no rental site trucks on site, only vehicles being stored by customers or the management company CubeSmart at that location. The special permit that's currently operating under approved the storage of rental trucks at the back of the property on July 24th, 2017. And it was previously determined that the storage of rental trucks and outdoor storage is an accessory use and permitted in the office light industrial zone where this property is located. There are no current zoning, building, or fire code violations at the site. All the adjacent properties are zoned the same OLI, and vehicles are currently being stored in the back of their property, and Merritt Hill Capital just wants to make sure they're being good citizens and bringing that to light rather than just assuming that they can continue to have the vehicles parked back there that are not being rented. So formerly, apparently there was a U-Haul dealership by the previous owner, Mr. Adeo, I believe, and we are not storing rental trucks there. We are not running a rental truck business there. But there are tenants that do have boats or RVs and extra vehicles that are sitting in the back of the property there and leased along with units as well. And just want to make a determination that it's a minor modification. And that's why we're here in front of you tonight.
Yeah. If memory serves, prior to the approval of the rental operation there, that's pretty much what that area was formerly used for. So in a sense, you're almost reverting back to an earlier use.
Okay.
I'm not 100% certain on that, but I do recall that the rental operation was a relatively recent addition to that use of that property.
And apparently wasn't too popular from what I read.
Seeing as how it's no longer in operation, that's probably a good guess.
Right, right. And you see parcel A there is now a part of the main property. So when they purchased, Merritt Hill purchased the self-storage business, Mr. Adeo also sold them parcel A. So that also gives a greater buffer to any adjacent property. And Mr. Adeo still owns the pretty impressive solar farm I see just to the south of that property.
Yes, that's what that access easement is for.
Right, right.
Here I am pointing at my screen, but you can't see what I'm pointing at.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. Any comments from the planner or other board members?
It seems to me like we were very concerned about along that line when we looked at this and how far it extended and what they were going to do there, how parking was going to be arranged and whatnot. Anybody else remember any of that?
I'm remembering some issues or some concerns regarding the parking of rental trucks back there. And farther back, I remember there being some discussion about the parking of customer vehicles, but I don't remember exactly what the issues were there.
So, if I may, I think kind of as discussed, that is somewhat of a reduction in the intensity of use. We're looking at going from a rental business to storage. So although the storage of vehicles is still going to exist on property, unless I'm mistaken, I don't believe it would be utilized as the same intensity of an actual U-Haul business. Photos were submitted, let me see if I can pull those up, of the existing kind of storage on site, and it's very minimal in that regard.
Mr. McGoldrick is actually correct. There's these are people who have an RV that usually use it for seasonal purposes or vehicles. They typically sit there for long periods of time. You get very little in and out traffic, if at all, if any. Much less intensity, as Mr. McGoldrick mentioned, of a rental business where you had trucks coming literally every day.
Yeah, some of my memory about prior to the rental business about vehicles there was some concern about customer vehicles, relatively large, similar to what we're seeing in the picture here. Some concern about those being parked closer to the road where they would be visible from Milford Road and from across Milford Road. Parked out behind the facility here, I'm pretty sure I'm remembering that that was not that was not objectionable to use that particular portion of the property. What people were concerned about, particularly people living across the road there on across Milford Road, they were worried about seeing vehicles of this size and type being parked relatively close to Milford Road where they were easily visible. But I'm kind of remembering now that there was a lot more comfort with the idea of keeping them in this location behind the facility, away from Milford Road.
It's almost 400 feet from the road. And if I read them correctly, the minutes show that there was probably greater concern for the beeping of the rental trucks.
Oh, I remember those discussions. Yes. Yes.
So we won't have to worry about that. And you really cannot see those vehicles from the road. That's a great aerial shot right there that Chris just pulled up. It's so far back behind the buildings, they aren't even visible.
Yeah, and I think that my memory is coming back a little bit. Granted, my memory is not as good as it used to be, but yeah, I do remember some discussions from the residents across Milford Road that they didn't really want to see a lot of trucks and big vehicles parked close to Milford Road where they could see them. They don't mind them being there. They just don't want to have to see them.
Sure.
And the proposed location here, I think, satisfies that criterion.
Okay.
Just from an observation point of view, I walk Milford Road all the time, and I didn't even know there were these vehicles parked. So I think it's pretty far back.
Yep, and as I say, that my memory of those discussions is consistent with that.
And like I said, we probably could have just kept doing it without saying anything, but we just wanted, we're new to the, obviously new to the area, want to make sure we're all above board and let you know we're not, we don't have U-Hauls back there. We have regular vehicles back there. So it's minor, but we thought it'd be better to be upfront with you guys.
Yeah, well, unless there's any further substantive discussion, the board might have a position to take on this.
I move that we find the modification minor in nature and direct staff to draft any necessary documents or prepare any necessary documents to support our finding.
Second.
Moved and seconded, the board find this is a minor modification and prepare whatever documentation is required. Any discussion of the motion?
Someplace do we make a decision on the minor modification once we decide it is one?
So the procedure would be that the board, if they find that motion to be amenable, they would vote that it is a minor modification, essentially that the proposal is operating under the original special permit, and then staff, myself, would issue a letter to the applicant stating such, that it's a minor modification and that no further permitting is required.
Yeah, the missing piece in Mr. Wood's motion was that the board approve the minor modification that it has found.
Just because
that was my intent of the motion. Thank you.
Just because it's minor doesn't mean we don't have to approve it.
Yes. Yeah, let's make sure we cross that particular T.
Thank you for catching that. I appreciate that.
I've done enough of these. You'd think I'd remember, but hey, it's getting late.
It's late.
Okay, further discussion of the amended motion. Hearing none. Mr. Hassinger.
Aye.
Ms. Hassinger.
Aye.
Mr. Wood.
Aye.
Mr. Venkatraman.
Aye.
Mr. Robbins. Aye. Motion carried unanimously. Staff will take care of the appropriate letter or whatever.
I'm afraid I do need to do the dastardly thing. We need to vote to extend the meeting beyond 10 o'clock. Got only
Second.
left.
Did I hear a second?
Second.
Second.
Yeah. Moved and seconded that the board vote to allow the meeting to extend past 10 o'clock. All in favor? Aye. All in favor. Even that has to be a roll call. Mr. Hassinger. Ms. Hassinger. Aye. Mr. Wood.
Aye.
Mr. Venkatraman.
Aye.
Mr. Robbins, aye. Motion carried unanimously. We can keep going for more than 8 minutes. Although I hope we don't have to keep going too much longer.
Thank you all for your time tonight. I really appreciate it. Mr. McGoldrick, thanks for moving me up. I appreciate that as well. So have a good evening. I wish you all well. Stay well.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to sign off then.
Okay. Yep, we'll let you sign off.
Okay. Bye-bye.
All righty. Next item, the remaining action item, determine whether the board wishes to submit a warrant article for the Springtown meeting to increase the number of recreational marijuana retailers allowed in the town of Grafton. The idea is, does this board want to put that on the warrant so that the town meeting has an opportunity to vote on whether they want to increase the number of recreational marijuana retailers? What's happened to date, we have a limit of 2, which we're well aware of. We have 2 applicants who have received their special permit from this board and are in the process with the state. We have a 3rd potential applicant who has exhibited some serious interest, has secured a host community agreement, but unfortunately would be limited by the current limitation. So the question before the board is, do we want to give the voters of town meeting an opportunity to consider allowing a 3rd on the basis that there is a definite interest in a 3rd? And given that definite interest, do we want to at least put it up to a vote of town meeting whether to allow that interest to go forward?
Could I start by asking what brought this before us? Only that you thought it might be a good idea, Dave, or did someone ask us? You know, because I see nothing on the record that anybody has asked us to do this.
Right. When a little bit of history, as some of us who were around back then remember, when we were first working on recreational marijuana zoning, the question came up whether the town wanted a limit, and if so, what was the most appropriate way to implement that. We considered whether that should be zoning, and we decided it really wasn't a zoning issue. And consequently, I don't actually remember who sponsored the warrant article that created the limit, but in any case, it was created as a general bylaw. But even at the time, there was some thought that the planning board might be an appropriate sponsor for that, but it turned out that we didn't do it that way. More recently, when the prospect of 3 marijuana retailers started looking very real, I can remember some informal discussion, not on the board per se, but from at least 1 or 2 individual members of the board, whether the board should consider sponsoring an increase in that limit. And again, I think we collectively, or those of us who talked about it at the time, thought it would be more appropriate to come from somebody like the Economic Development Commission. And more recently, the town administrator had proposed a warrant article to do that. The select board last week chose to not put that on the warrant, at which time a couple of different people queried me as to whether the planning board would be interested in sponsoring that. And on the basis of informal interest on the part of a few citizens of the planning board, at least considering sponsoring something like this, I thought it would be worthwhile to put the question before the board as to whether the board would be interested in sponsoring such a warrant article.
And to answer as well, Bob, I did message Dave directly as well that I thought it was within our interest to put it on our agenda to discuss as a board. I don't know who was on the public also messaged him, but I figured that was a thing for me to put forward for us.
Yeah. Usually, if we put something on the warrant, we're prepared to explain it, argue for it, support it. Are we even competent to do that as a board?
Yeah, I think so. I know I don't have a vote on this, but I think we have 2 approvals, and I think from personally my side, we should first wait to see how those pan out, and instead of harping on something which has been approved to have been approved, we don't know the repercussions of those for the town. So I would say we should hold back on this and see how the others thing work out, and then decide.
If I may, I'm happy to describe why I thought putting it for our board is worthwhile. And I don't know how many here watched the select board on last Tuesday when this was voted down by 3-2. The thought process for me is it's less about us necessarily supporting an outcome on this vote one way or the other, but giving our town the option to choose it. This is a year we're going to be asking the public to vote on an override because the town's not taking in an X amount of money that we think we need. Having the opportunity for the town to vote to allow a third business of a particular type that business owners think is viable is something that I think is worth doing. This is a thing that though it's not directly in our zoning bylaws, it is something that is relatively close to what we have a purview over. It's not directly for our purview, so to speak, but I think giving the town the opportunity to say, yes, we want to have a third business owner with potential revenue for the town able to open is a good thing. And I also think the lack of having three, where we have three business owners wanting to do it, is something that could, in theory, slow down the process for the existing two we even already approved. The unknowns in terms of who's going to be first to the finish line is a lot of financial sink of the business owners to try to get their business off the ground if there's a potential that they may not be the first with the license and first able to do this.
Right. The problem is that I don't think the planning board at this point, without input, can assess whether it will make any difference to how much we get. And particularly, we don't have any assessment, any input at this point about whether the current 2 out of 3 situation is impeding any of the 3 moving ahead. I can see how it could, and that would be a good point in this, but we don't have any information at this point about that, and I would like us. I don't want to go to town meeting with an article that we can't support and argue for with some substance as a planning board.
Yeah, from a planning perspective, I think in general and kind of consistent with things like the comprehensive master plan, which recognizes a need for more commercial development. So from a planning perspective, what we have right now with that limit of 2 is a visible barrier to business development. And I see it as a barrier only because we know of 3 serious applicants that want to develop this business, 2 of which have made it through part of the permitting process, 1 of which is not going to attempt to make it through without this limit being raised. So the limit is a perceptible barrier to business development today. And so that's why I think from a planning perspective, I support raising that limit from 2 to 3 because I see some real demand for it. It's not hypothetical. There is a third business that would like very much to proceed, and it's in a zone that we've already said that's where we want this kind of development to take place. So I see this from from my purview, from my position on the planning board, thinking of planning as opposed to zoning. I see this as, I can support it as a way of removing a barrier. Ultimately, of course, as we pointed out, it is up to town meeting to decide whether to vote for or against it. But I support it because I see it as removing a very, very real barrier.
Yeah. Well, now you just raised something, Dave. You said that one of the businesses is being impeded and is not moving forward because of this problem. That's information that's not on any record that I know of. You must have information that we don't have.
Right, that's,
and I'd like to see them here telling us that.
I just feel that it really should have come from the selectmen, our executive branch, and or even from a petition, a petition with from a citizen's petition, and they can certainly bring forward a something to the agenda. That's, you only need a small number of votes to do that, and signatures.
And that could happen if this board doesn't feel comfortable submitting this to the warrant. There is at least a fair probability that a citizen's petition will turn out to happen.
And that's how it should come, because yes, I agree. It should, the town meeting, the legislature of this town should have a right to vote and make that choice. It should have been just a walkthrough to it, but it wasn't. And I think that it's up to the citizens to say, yeah, we want this on the warrant. But I'm not sure the planning board is the right venue to do that. I think it's out of our area. It's just not what we're supposed to do. We don't make that kind of decision for the town. We don't decide how many liquor licenses that the town would want or anything like that, or, those are the things that really, that's not our area.
So I will take it as a consensus or the opinion of a majority of the board that the board should not put this on the warrant. Anybody disagree with that?
Well, we have a comment from the public,
Yes.
rather extensive comment.
Would you like me to read that?
All right. Now,
Mr. Chairman?
This is not normally a topic on which we expect to get commentary from the public, but given the nature of this particular subject matter in recent history, I think it would be worthwhile reading this.
So the comment is from Mr. Edward Prisby of 25 Danielle. He's asking us to do it in favor of the proposal. He notes, when we passed the bylaw 2 years ago, we said we would wait and gauge public sentiment concerning the number of allowable facilities and increase the number later if we felt comfortable with it. We presently have no facilities up and running, but we have 3 entities all pursuing licensure through the CCC. As such, the number of available HCAs through the town stands as an impediment to opening a new facility. This is because marijuana establishments need investors. Given the current pandemic, that investment is difficult to come by. It is made more difficult when each competitor for a license cannot assure its investors that they will not waste their money on an application that is dead on arrival. Question: why not then simply allow town meeting to determine whether we should increase the number by 1? Opposition to marijuana is a non-argument. The law allows marijuana use. Opposition based on not knowing how it will affect Grafton is a non-starter. There is a shop 2 miles outside.
He mentioned the HCAs, the host community agreements. That's where this problem started. The Board of Selectmen, now the Select Board, created this problem. Some other towns only have issued as many HCAs as they had slots available through their zoning or whatever was the control. Our board saw fit to issue 3 HCAs when they knew that only 2 of them could make it. And I didn't hear anybody address how that was going to work and what was going to happen. You'll recall that at a little further point down the line that I made quite a point while we were looking at permits for this, that I wanted to have some definition about that and figure out whose role it was and what would happen and how this would play out. And it took some pushing to even get that. Got back from, as I recall, we got back from town council that it's a race to the finish. Whoever the first 2 are who get to the final stage at the CCC will get okays through the town based on the zone, based on the bylaw, and the 3rd will lose.
Just didn't like that at the time. I still don't like it.
We're being asked to clean up that mess when, we were told when we were doing the permitting that that was none of our concern and to stay away from it.
Yeah. If I may, from my end, it's less about like cleaning up an HCA mess, so to speak. It is more about, even without 3 businesses having HCAs, we have 3 businesses that want to do this type of business in town. And like Dave did say, I think the EDC would have been a better sponsor, but they're not the ones sponsor. They haven't sponsored it. This was initially drafted by the town administrator, but he doesn't want to essentially sign his name to it for the town warrant. So my thinking was that we should sponsor it as a board, which gives, at least to some citizens, a feeling of legitimacy around the idea and viability of doing a change compared to a citizen's petition that amends the bylaws. I've seen that come up a bunch of times in the past town meetings, that any change to zoning or general bylaws that are citizen petitions are generally frowned upon because they're not sponsored by a board. And so that was my thinking in doing this. But
Yeah. Quite frankly, I think this is within the purview of this board. We are charged with planning as well as administering of zoning bylaws. And planning is a pretty broad topic, and it includes planning for the development of the town going into the future in directions that we think that, you know, that the town wants. And this happens to me, this is a planning issue. It's removing a visible barrier to commercial development, which most people would agree. Aside from the particulars of a particular business, people generally agree that commercial development is important. And I think this falls within our purview.
And there are many barriers to business developments.
Well, sure, we can't remove them all, but you know.
At a recent town meeting, we even put forward several articles trying to remove some of the barriers in this area. And we failed miserably. And we didn't have much support from other boards.
It doesn't mean we don't try this again. Yeah, not everything we put forward is going to succeed, but if we as a board think this is worthwhile, we could sponsor this. However, if we as a board, if only a minority of this board thinks this is worthwhile, then the board's not going to put it forward.
Not a question of worthwhile. It's a question of, should we be doing it? Should we be giving our approval and arguing points that we don't? I think the most important points are ones that we don't have enough information to argue. We can look at it and say, yeah, it'd be really great. I don't believe it's going to change anything in the real near future in any case, unless we can document that more than just one business is being impeded by this. So we're not even going to get the two as soon as we would. If we can document that, then that's a good reason to consider, although it's still economics, not zoning.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
You may.
I just want to kind of point out, and thank you, Natalia, for adding. She did note in the comment section that we have meeting materials that were uploaded. However, one was sent similarly too late to be included in the meeting materials tonight. So we may want to push this discussion, and that will give us time to include those meeting minutes, or those comments. And I'd be happy to reach out to kind of similar businesses and see if we can get some more information, some more context in regards to existing businesses that are looking to locate and how that's affecting their timeline. I do want to take a quick minute to just point out in regards to barriers, because they're not so much here, but somewhat of a misconception, I believe, in the or a misunderstanding, I should say, in some of the comments that we did receive. We should note that even if we did support this proposal, and even if then town meeting did vote to approve to add additional licenses, this wouldn't be approving any specific project. Any of those projects would still have to go through the normal regulatory process. They would be coming before this board and any other boards to address site plans and other issues in regards to kind of effects on traffic and those kinds of considerations. So even if we do go to town meeting with this warrant and it is passed by town meeting, it doesn't remove all the barriers. These businesses are still facing additional hurdles to reach their end goal of opening. Just something to consider.
Right. I noticed that in all of those that we've seen on our record, and I'll say that I also received emails directly at home in my own email from multiple people, all making essentially the same argument. Look fairly well organized. The one possibility is to draft a potential article for submission, because I think that we don't have to do a submission until the next meeting. Draft an article and plan some sort of a process at the next meeting to have a chance for open discussion, have the people who want to do it be able to come and make the case such as they see it should be, and the people on the other side, of course.
Yeah, so we could very well do that. The deadline for warrant article submissions is May 6th. We have a meeting on May 4th, so we don't need to make a commitment tonight.
But the downside is, if we do that, it may keep the people who would otherwise do a citizens petition from doing it, because of the
deadlines.
You know, it has to be really clear that if anybody wants to bring a citizen petition, they should go ahead and not count on us.
To that, exactly, to that point, I would encourage anyone who is considering submitting a citizen petition on this topic to proceed on the assumption that this board will not be submitting a warrant article. If we take the time, and I agree, let's take some time. We don't have to, we don't have to make a commitment tonight. But if we can have a, for instance, I think I heard you suggesting a proposed warrant article and additional information gathered in support of and in opposition to, and to sort of have a more focused discussion based upon more information a week from tonight.
Right, including direct participation in whatever we can accommodate here in our meeting. In other words, Ed Prisby or one of the objectors can make input. I'd really like us to figure out why they can't at least call in to Zoom and be heard. I know that happens. I don't know enough about Zoom to know whether, but I'd like it to be open. I'd like it to be open so that we can have a dialogue.
Yeah, we can look into those features, and kind of as I noted before, and I want to be a little bit wary because I don't know where we stand on the live feed through, but that there was discussion on allowing phone call-in features through our regular channel. So I don't know if that'll be fully implemented, but I can work on those features to see if we can do something in addition to the Q&A that we currently have.
My understanding is CMRPC is doing a lot of this, and I've heard that they use a feature called waiting room, where people can come in to a waiting room and they can be let in. The idea is to avoid just everybody coming in, but you can let people in who belong there and fully participate. I think they can even video participate. I've seen some meetings where, well, obviously we have a good many people who are participating tonight besides the board itself. So anyway, I just really want to see as open a process as we can. I hope our agenda next time isn't too heavy, because we might spend a little time on it.
Yeah.
And
I'm not
I
a-
do have a thought, Chris. I'm sorry, Dave.
Go ahead, Justin.
Just that it may be worthwhile for us as a board to reach out to the businesses that own HCA agreements with the town, so to speak, just to say if they have any positive or negative thoughts they want to share with the board on record about us potentially advocating for a increase in the number of licenses if they have thoughts to share. That might be worth being explicit because I don't know how many of the HCA owners follow our everyday meetings.
Yeah, that's part and parcel, I think, of what we could do to try to reach out to other folks. And I mean, in the end, what we're trying to do is determine whether this board is sufficiently interested in submitting this proposal for the town meeting. As I said, for anybody who is listening tonight or anybody who's watching and recording this in the next couple of days, get the word out. If you want to see this happen, you may want to organize a citizens petition, which, if it turns out the planning board does put this on the warrant, you've already got a citizens petition on there. We can deal with that. That's not a problem.
Well, the submission deadline is Wednesday.
6, yeah.
Wednesday, May 6th.
At our meeting is Monday. Do the selectmen meet on Tuesday? Justin seems to say, and the submission deadline is on Wednesday. If I were an advocate, I think I'd get my petition written up and signed and be ready to go to the town clerk in case I need to. And if I don't, cool.
Yep, there are currently 2 avenues, and in principle, another board could meet. Actually, it occurs to me to remember that I think it's the town charter, that any single elected official is also eligible to submit a warrant article. Don't know that we've ever used that, but that's part of the language. In any case, I think we've beat this horse to death for tonight, and we'll plan on having a more discussion, hopefully more informed discussion on this 1 week from tonight.
Mr. Chairman, can I make my observations on this? I know it is 10:21, but what the heck? A few more minutes. We will be late. So starting off, I got a few points. One is I'm still, when this came up in the agenda, I was not absolutely clear what is planning board's responsibility and what is planning board's authority in sponsoring an article of this order, of this nature. If we do have the responsibility, or if it's well within our authority, I do want to have some information to bank on. We cannot go shoot in the dark and say that this is our personal opinion, so we need to have 3 licenses for pot facilities. It ties back to my business background. It doesn't make sense. We would not open up and approve 4 Dunkin' Donuts licenses in town. We have 18,000 people. There's only so many people who can come and buy coffee. Just because we open up 4 Dunkin' Donut shops doesn't mean that we will have more people flooding it. If that is where I'm struggling with, what is the basis of making a decision to even support such a proposal or such an article for the town, right? I want to see the first 2 which have been approved. Let's see the implications of it. Maybe there is a demand. Let's go back and revisit. Let us give them the opportunity. We approved them. My heart doesn't agree to it, but we approved it. The town voted for it. We said, fine, go ahead, run this business. Let us give them a couple of, some time, let them run with the business. If they make money, if they don't make money, if there is a significant demand that these 2 business establishments are not able to address, maybe there is a need. But if these 2 business establishments that are in the advanced stages of approval, not that they have been approved, that they are in advanced stages of approval, if they themselves are not running a profitable business, what are we basing our whole proposal on? That's where I keep struggling with this whole
but here I think you're confusing a business decision with a planning board decision. If we have 3 Dunkin' Donuts operating in town. And if I want to open a 4th Dunkin' Donuts, I will only do so if I see that there's a business opportunity. You know, it's not my job as a planning board or any kind of town official to judge the viability of a business. That's the business owner's decision.
Right.
And if in the current example, if we have 3 operators who believe that they can make a go of a retail marijuana business, who am I to argue with that? It might turn out to be a poor business decision on the part of at least one of them, but I'm not going to stand in the way of that. If
Then why should we even support that, Mr. Chair?
If a business person wants to open a particular business of any kind, provided it's allowed in a particular zone, it may well be allowed by right, never even comes to the planning board. I'm not going to second guess the decisions of a business operator or someone who's proposing to open a business. They're not going to propose that if they don't think that they can make a go of the business. Not every business that opens stays in business. Some of them find out that, hey, this just isn't working. I'm not concerned with that as a planning board member, not at all.
Right, I completely agree with that piece. I also would second that piece, that we should also, while we should not get in the way of any business proposition, it's the business owner's responsibility to evaluate the business case and then go ahead and pursue an opportunity. I don't see us, why do we even get involved in presenting or supporting any such proposition here? I can extend the same argument to, what do we have, 11 liquor licenses in town? Why don't we make it 20? But there are certain limitations. We can't. I know there are some state regulations or something.
That's not within our authority. If it was, I would say up to, I mean, I suppose I might object to allowing 100 liquor licenses in town side of Grafton, but
you get the piece.
I don't think we're using all our licenses now, though.
Yeah, and what I was just going to respond to that probably as well is that 3 Dunkin' Donuts, we don't have a bylaw that says we can only have 1 or 3 Dunkin' Donuts in town. We do have 6 coffee shops in town right now, and that is, worth being aware of. It 6 businesses for 18,000 people can operate for coffee, where neighboring towns all have coffee shops as well. Now, most of our neighboring towns are no towns, so they do not support local marijuana shops at all, even though the state does. It's a legal and viable business. I think removing the barrier, allowing business owners to say, we want to open a business here. You have this type, it's a legal business, is probably a viable choice. And I'm not really a fan of marijuana myself. I'm not going to be a shopper here, but any one of these stores, but I think it's definitely something that, the town gets to gross of the profits. To continue to bang on the drum, I think it makes sense for us from a planning perspective to sponsor the warrant, but I'll let us move on.
Let's talk about it next week.
I'm looking at the clock here and thinking some of us, may have things that we need to do in the morning and so on and so forth. We've spent a lot more time on this topic than I thought we would, and there's more we can do. I think let's go back to Bob's suggestion that we pull together some additional material and conclude this discussion next week.
I'll note that there's some material in the Q&A which has an answer, but maybe if we don't ask it, then we don't have to answer it.
Yeah, so I think that I'm looking at the Q&A, and I will summarize it by saying the questioner is making the point that the board doesn't have to endorse the passage of this. The board has to simply say, we think it's worthwhile putting this before town meeting. But again, let's continue the discussion next week.
Yeah, we do have to say we want to oppose the selectmen, and we do want to say,
Anyway, I move to adjourn.
I second that.
I'm debating whether I should recognize that motion. I will I will defer recognition of that motion for just a moment to ask whether there is anything by way of a staff report that we really need to hear tonight.
We do
So,
have bills.
so there's the two discussion items, which I recommend that those could probably be continued and discussed next week. But bills, staff report, I don't have anything, but bills and minutes we may want to review.
I thought that we gave permission for the bills to be signed by just the chair and you.
Correct, but I believe the board still needs to vote to authorize it, but the actual signatures, myself and the chairman.
Yes, I'm assuming that that would be appropriate for there to be a motion to authorize the bills to be signed.
I so move that the bills to be signed by the chair and the planner.
Second.
Moved and seconded that the board authorize the bills to be signed by chair and planner. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. Mr. Hassinger.
Aye.
Ms. Hassinger.
Aye.
Mr. Wood.
Aye.
Mr. Venkatraman.
Aye.
All right, and I think I will now recognize the motion to adjourn, which has already been seconded.
Thank you.
Who made those motions?
It's not debatable, Mr. Chairman.
What?
Who made the motions?
Linda.
Adjourn?
Linda made the motion to adjourn.
Yes.
Second?
And I seconded.
Prabhu seconded
Thank
it.
you.
Oh.
Let it be on record. Dave is the only person in the last 25 years who could ever get my last name right. Ever.
Hey, I can get something right once in a while. All right, we will vote on the motion to adjourn. Mr. Hassinger.
Aye.
Ms. Hassinger.
Please say Fingal. Aye.
Mr. Wood.
Retriever here.
Aye.
Trying to help us.
Mr. Venkatraman.
Aye.
Mr. Robbins, aye. Thank you all for your patience with the meeting tonight.
Good night.
You're
Good night.
adjourned.
Thank you.
Good night.
I'll let you shut it down, dear.
Oh, yeah.
Bye, guys.
Chris?
Yep, I'm just trying to save the chat and then I'll,
Okay, can you send me that afterwards too? Or,
yeah.
'cause I don't think I can save my own. At least I don't see anywhere.
Maybe it won't let me. It's not letting me save chat. Let me see if I can give you the permission to.
So do you say, are you able to save the Q&A and the video or just?
Yeah,
the-
I have the video recorded. I'm just trying to, it's not letting me do the chat. Which it may automatically do that. I know in the past I've.
What about the Q&A?
It's not giving me the option there either. So I'll have to see. I think it saves all of that.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
And so now Bob DeToma will have his own copy at this point, or because he wasn't
I
there?
might
or-
have to send it because it looked like his cut out part way through.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it's not gonna let me, so I'll have to just hope that it saves it.
All right.
And we kind of talked about it all too for the recording, so it should be in some form there,
Yeah.
but
Okay. And this is where a double screen would have been very useful.
Yeah.
All right. See you tomorrow.
All right, see ya. Thank you.